Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto X Nemuri harem in My Hero Academia. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Curious KITSUNE 654 and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1. What? A cry of outrage rang out loudly as a young man about 15 or 16 with bright blonde hair and whiskered cheeks glared at an equally blonde and very well-endowed woman with a diamond mark on her forehead sitting behind a simple wooden desk, both sitting in plain wooden chairs. You can't be serious, Tsunade Bachan. Not even blinking, the now-named Tsunade stared back at her fellow blonde with an unwavering expression on her face as she steepled her fingers. I'm completely serious, Naruto, this is for your own safety. These two were Naruto Uzumaki, the hyperactive knuckle-headed ninja of Konoha, the newest Toad Sage, and Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, and Tsunade Senju, Hokage of Konoha and world-renowned medic. I can take care of myself, damn it. Naruto yelled, standing up and slamming his hands onto the desk hard enough to create cracks. You can't just send me away every time there is danger. The Akatsuki are just too much of an unknown to risk letting you stay here, Naruto, the busty woman said calmly. They've already collected 7 of the Bijuu, and we cannot let the remaining 2 fall into their hands. We both saw what Nagato could do, you even admitted yourself that it was no small amount of luck that you were able to beat him, and now this Toby has his Rinnegan. As she spoke, Tsunade glanced out a nearby window to see the massive devastation to be seen, the whole village having been reduced to a crater that was slowly being filled with newly built buildings. All of that was caused by one man, just one single man, by waving his hand and muttering a pair of words that would haunt citizens' dreams for the next decade at least. Not only that, but I will not lose another person I care about, not as long as I have a single breath in my body. Tsunade stated adamantly as she turned her attention back towards the whiskered blonde. And you won't, Bachan, Naruto said, his expression softening a bit as he sank back into his seat. I promise, I won't be dying anytime soon, I still have to take the position of Hokage from you after all. Unable to help herself, Tsunade smiled a tiny bit herself for just a split second before her expression turned to one of sadness. I know you won't because I'll make sure of it. Fuinjutsu. Sunya. Before Naruto could react, a soft blue glow lit up on the floor and then he was completely frozen in place. Eyes widening in panic as he realized what was happening, the whiskered blonde tried to move as hard as he could to no avail. I'm sorry, Naruto, but I knew you wouldn't want to cooperate, Tsunade said as she stood up from her seat, revealing that she had a large white and blue slug resting in the palm of one of her hands. Until such time as the threat of Akatsuki is dealt with, you're to stay in the Shikatsu forest with Kitsayu. Unable to say anything, or really do anything for that matter, Naruto simply glowered angrily at the woman as she walked around the desk, so she was standing right in front of him. I'm sorry for this, Naruto-san, but I agree with Tsunade-sama that this is the best course of action, the slug Kitsayu said in a soft female voice while leaping onto his shoulder and turning around to face Tsunade. I'll do my best to keep him out of trouble. I know, now hurry, the seal won't last much longer. Of course, Tsunade-sama. Kitsayu said before glowing a bright blue. Ninpo. Sudzukari Jayakukuchi. No. Naruto shouted as he shot from his seat, his eyes having changed to a golden color with bar pupils while orange highlights surrounded his eyes and reached to pull the slug off his shoulder. Yos no jutsu. Poof. However, his attempt was in vain as Kitsayu finished the technique and they both vanished in a puff of smoke. Damn it, my Naruto sense is tingling, something went wrong. Tsunade groaned as she felt a familiar nagging sensation in the back of her head that told her the whiskered blonde had somehow fucked up her plan to keep him safe. But said knucklehead. Poof. Kuzo. Naruto swore loudly as he and Kitsayu appeared in a different place. I swear I'm gonna kick Bachan's ass when I get. The whiskered blonde trailed off as he noticed something odd. He couldn't feel the ground beneath. Also, was it just him or was it suddenly very windy now? It took exactly 3 seconds after noticing this to realize what was wrong. We're falling right now, aren't we? Yes, we are, Naruto-san. Kitsayu said in a slightly panicked tone. We're not supposed to be falling right now, are we? No, we should not be, Naruto-san. Oh son of a Mainu. Shaking off his annoyance, Naruto took a quick look around to find that he was not only falling, he was falling from a very high height as he saw clouds drifting by below him. However, thanks to this high altitude, Naruto was able to notice some pretty important and alarming details such as the massive city beneath him at least 6 times bigger than Konoha next to the ocean. The giant metal snow-covered buildings that said city consisted of. The utterly numerous amount of humans he could sense that currently occupied the city thanks to Sage Mode. And lastly, yet most eye-catching of all. Katsuyu, am I hallucination or is there a giant horned hot lady wearing a white bushy brows outfit duking it out with a moving pile of rocks? The blonde asked in a confused tone. No Naruto-san, I see them too. The slug stated, sounding just as confused as he did. Good to know. Ground level. You take Yana, a literal giant of a woman and otherwise known as the pro-hero Mount Lady, grinned widely as she easily blocked a wild swing from her opponent, a vaguely humanoid-shaped rock golem. The pair were just outside the city, more specifically at a beachfront area that was normally quite the hotspot but was now abandoned aside from the dueling pair and a few news choppers. This is perfect. Only my first day in this city and I get to handle such highly publicized villain attack. She thought while grabbing the limb and literally ripping it off the main body before promptly smashing it over the thing's head, shattering both. This is just the kind of publicity I needed to make my debut. Ah. Fuck. A male voice cried out in pain, the broken rock falling away to reveal a gangly man standing inside a small hollow area in the thing's head, glaring angrily at the woman. I'll make you pay for that, you worthless hero. Waving his hand, the shattered stone suddenly stopped falling and flew back up to the golem, seamlessly reforming back into a solid body again. Oh, don't worry, I'll just cover your rent. What do you think of a nice prison cell, a whole 4x6 one all to yourself? Mount Lady asked jokingly while stepping backwards to avoid a wild flurry of strikes. Tell you what, I'll even sweeten the deal and make it a nice supermax. Don't mock me. The golem man yelled as he charged straight at the giant woman with his fists raised. I'll crush you. Smash you into paste. Oh sorry, but I can't let you do that. Instead of dodging again, Mount Lady met the attack head-on and catching the stone limbs mid-swing. The sheer momentum caused the titanic chick's heels to dig into sand and snow as she slid back several yards before managing to stop. I just got a nice new makeover and there is no way I'm gonna let you mess it up. With her piece said, Mount Lady shot her knee up and smashed the golem's chest to pieces. Then, before the thing could start to rebuild itself, she used her grip on its arms to hoist what remained of the top half over her shoulder and toss it into the ocean with a heavy splash. Maybe that'll help you clean up your act. The woman stated tauntingly while dusting her hands off. Nailed it. Once Mount Lady was done with her showmanship, she stepped into the water herself, intent on recovering the villain before he either drowned or regained his bearings. Hoi. Giant hot lady. However, after just a few steps, the giant-sized heroine had her attention stolen away by a loud shout from above. Snapping her gaze towards the sky, she couldn't help but blink in surprise as she spotted a whiskered blonde teen in the air several hundred yards directly above her. Another villain. Must be a real stupid one if he's calling me out from way up there. Mount Lady thought, giggling under her breath as she watched a young man falling towards her. What the hell are you doing up there, kid? Trying to fly but forgot the wings. Hahaha. That's a good one. The boy said with a chuckle before shaking his head and turning serious again. But seriously though, you mind lending me a hand? This wasn't exactly intentional. Okay, either he's a very stupid villain or he just some kid who messed up while screwing around with his quirk. The giant blonde thought with a roll of her eyes while turning around and taking a few steps backwards with her hands held up in a cupped position. Alright kid. I've got ya. Just keep it steady. As one would expect with a world where almost everybody had some kind of superpower, it wasn't uncommon that some would have trouble controlling said power without it figuratively, and in some cases quite literally, blowing up in their face. Sure thing lol, look out. Sploosh. Wagga. Spinning around on reflex as a wave of water suddenly splashed her back, Mount Lady only had a split second to see as the golem she'd been fighting burst out of the ocean, with its lower half replaced by sand, before a stone fist crashed into her gut. You bitch. I'll kill you. The man controlling it yelled, just visible through a broken segment in the front, while punching her again, knocking the wind out of her. Kuzo. Meanwhile, Naruto swore loudly as he crashed through the huge amount of salt water that had been tossed into the air, effectively blinding him. Ah. It poof. Katsuyu's scream of pain was cut off mid-sentence as she was forced to dispel before the salty fluid killed her. Well, this is gonna hurt. Tumbling through the air wildly, unable to see and his sage senses too overloaded to help, Naruto was pretty sure he was in for a pretty rough landing. The fuck? So imagine his surprise when instead of a painful freezing dip into the ocean below, the whiskered blonde found himself crashing into and being enveloped by something soft, warm, and shiny. Quickly blinking away the water in his eyes, the teen only felt his confusion rise when he found himself surrounded by purple. However, a split second later some movement above him caught his attention, causing Naruto to glance upwards to see the giant lady's head looming over him, her expression a mixture of surprise and pain. Oh my kami, Naruto thought, his eyes widening as it clicked in his mind. I'm smooshed against a huge buwa. Without warning, Naruto was flung away with the force of a cannon when the giant breast he crashed into sprang back to its original shape, the fleshy lobe jiggling like a pile of jello as it did. Crack. This time however, the whiskered blonde's flight ended right after it started as he ended up smashing into the head of the golem the woman had been fighting. Easily breaking through the fractured rock, Naruto ended up giving the man controlling the beast a powerful headbutt before he could react, before smashing right out the back with said man in tow and tumbling into the freezing ocean below. With its master separated from it, the golem itself immediately collapsed, falling apart like a puppet that's had its strings cut. This in turn left Mount Lady standing all by herself with a baffled expression, her brain still trying to understand what just happened exactly. However, upon a now familiar mop of golden hair popping back to the surface with a gasp, the titanic blonde snapped from her shocked stupor and scooped the whiskered teen out of the water. "Hey kid, you okay? AJ just, peachy." Naruto stuttered sarcastically, his whole body shaking and his skin quickly gaining a blue tinge from the cold, but otherwise he was unharmed as his eyes faded back to normal. Despite his coldness though, the blonde's cheeks were a nice cherry red as he avoided looking directly at his fellow blonde, or more specifically her assets Okami. This is awkward. Should he be apologizing? How would someone apologize? Oh hey, sorry about randomly falling out of the sky and crashing into your massive boobs. I bet nobody's ever had to deal with anything like this before. Meanwhile, NQV universe. Achoo. Titan Cliff. Naruto crashed into the softest thing he had ever felt in his life as Mount Lady and Kamui Woods appeared in front of him, coming up out of the water and appeared in front of him, blocking his escape route. Naruto crashed right into Mount Lady's right tit, sinking into her flesh deep enough that his entire body sank into her boob before her breast returned back to its normal shape and he bounced out of her breast. Naruto was sent flying in the opposite direction, cursing the fact that he had sneezed at a time like this. Whoever made him sneeze, Naruto hoped that he was having a bad day. And back. Seeing the teen's flustered actions, Mount Lady couldn't help but giggle under her breath as she easily figured out why. "Don't worry, I'll get you somewhere warm in a second, I just got a gotcha." Reaching into the water a second time with her free hand, the titanic blonde sifted around for a few seconds before grinning as she pulled out the limp form of the villain she'd been fighting. That grin quickly turned to a sympathetic wince though when she saw the huge bruise already forming on the guy's forehead as he groaned in pain. "Yeesh, looks like we really got the breast of him, huh? Ha. And nice one." Naruto said with a chuckle, relaxing a bit upon seeing she wasn't upset at him, before sneezing loudly as a powerful shiver ran down his back. But seriously, enough joking around, I'm freezing here." Alright, calm down kid, we're going," Mount Lady said with a giggle as she started walking back to the shoreline, where the media could already be seen amassing. "So mind explaining that little skydiving fun of yours? You know it's illegal to use your quirk in public like that without a hero or provisional license." "Sure, Jay, just two things I wanna know first," Naruto said as he rubbed his arms for warmth, getting the titanic woman's attention. Where the hell am I and what in the hell is a Q quirk? End chapter. Chapter 2. Last time. Alright, calm down kid, we're going," Mount Lady said with a giggle as she started walking back to the shoreline, where the media could already be seen amassing. "So mind explaining that little skydiving fun of yours? You know it's illegal to use your quirk in public like that without a hero or provisional license." "Sure, Jay, just two things I wanna know first," Naruto said as he rubbed his arms for warmth, getting the titanic woman's attention. Where the hell am I and what in the hell is a Q quirk? And now, police station. Inside a small typically designed interrogation room, Naruto could be found sitting on a plain and somewhat uncomfortable metal chair with a bored expression on his face as he leaned against an equally plain metal table, his head resting in the palm of one hand while he idly tapped the metal with the other. "Geez, how long are they gonna make me wait in here, I'm so freaking bored." The whiskered blonde grumbled as he stared at the doorway impatiently. It had been a few hours since he'd accidentally helped that giant chick, Mount Lady she said her name was, took down that golem dude, and he'd been stuck dealing with constant annoyances the whole time. First, he had to deal with a bunch of annoying people called reporters who wouldn't stop harassing him and Mount Lady after she shrunk down to the size of a regular person, which made him wonder if she was possible a relative of the Akimichi clan. After they finally gave those guys the slip, the once giant woman took him to this place, where he had to spend several minutes being fussed over by some elderly nurse lady, though that wasn't so bad as she gave him some candy afterwards. Then he had to deal with some guy grilling him over about using his quirk in public by some dude dressed in a trench coat. Naturally though, this just ended with him asking what the hell a quirk even was again, because Mount Lady never answered, and while he may be a little dumb at times, he was pretty sure they weren't talking about his sunny disposition. This seemed to stump the man, as he repeatedly asked if Naruto was serious about not knowing what a quirk was, then asked things like where Naruto was from and what he had been doing before the fall. Not seeing any reason to lie, Naruto told the guy what he could, though his annoyance was only further fueled when he had to explain things like the hidden villages, shinobi, jutsu, and even chakra of all thing. Did that guy live under a rock or something? Who doesn't know about chakra? After the blonde finished his long explanation, the trench coat guy excused himself and asked Naruto to wait while he went to do something or another. He kinda tuned out at the waiting part. However, what he didn't know was the man hadn't actually gone far, just to the other side of the one-way mirror, where Mount Lady and a scruffy dude with baggy eyes, messy black hair, a large gray scarf, and funky yellow goggles were chatting away as they stared at the young man. That was Shota Izawa, otherwise known as the pro hero Racerhead, a somewhat underground hero who preferred to stay out of the spotlight if he could. "So Namasa-san, what's the verdict? The kid doing alright?" The once giant woman asked with a weak grin, a mild edge of nervousness mixed in her voice and for good reason. If it got out that she was possibly responsible for giving a kid brain damage, indirectly or not, then it would kill her career and/or reputation as a pro hero. "Honestly, I'm not sure," Namasa said with a shrug, making all humor vanish from Mount Lady's face, while the scruffy guy perked up in interest. "Unless he's the greatest liar I've ever met, that boy truly doesn't know what quirks are and truly believes his unusual story." "Unusual, yeah, that's a word for it, so is delusional," the tired-looking guy muttered while rolling his eyes. "Recovery girl said that he wasn't injured in any way, so he's probably just suffering from the drawback of his quirk. Wouldn't be the first one I've seen that causes something like this." "I figured that too, Eraserhead, but that still doesn't explain why we also haven't been able to find any records of a Naruto Uzumaki at all," Namasa countered Eraserhead, neither of them noticing, or just not caring, as Mount Lady wiped the sweat off her brow with a sigh of relief. "I even had his fingerprints checked in case he was using a fake name, but got nothing, not even in the quirk registry, and the blood tests are still running." "All eyes have a grain of truth in them," the scruffy hero replied cryptically, earning a raised brow from the trench coat wearing detective whilst Mount Lady just looked completely lost until he elaborated. He said something about an overprotective grandmother who tried to trap him somewhere to keep him safe. Perhaps there are no records of him, because that part of his tale isn't completely fictitious. "That is possible," Namasa muttered while rubbing his chin in thought. "If that's the case though, then why would they do that? No idea, too many unknowns to come up with a valid theory yet, we'll have to wait until this kid." "Ugh eyes," Mount Lady cut Eraserhead off as she stared at the one-way mirror in shock, or more specifically the now empty room on the other side. "Where'd he go?" "Boom. Oh son of a bitch." The two men swore simultaneous. Meanwhile, 3 minutes earlier. Got to pee, got to pee, got to pee." Wandering around the halls of the police station after slipping out of the interrogation room, Naruto barely managed to keep his composure as his bladder screamed at him for release. Where the hell is bathroom? He would have just asked someone for directions, but for some reason the whole place was seemingly deserted, despite having been completely bustling earlier when he first arrived. Had Naruto not been so distracted by his need to take a leak, he may have noticed the clocks on the walls, which showed that it was nearly 2 in the morning, hence most of the staff had headed home. So the boy was left with no other option but to search the place by himself and hope he found the bathroom before it was too late. Oof. Gah. Or that's what the blonde thought until he rounded a corner and ended up bumping into a woman, knocking her onto her ass. "Sorry about that, I wasn't paying attention where I was, Anko-chan." Naruto started to apologize as he reflexively held his hand out to help the lady up, only to cut himself off when he got a good look at her. This was Nemuri Kayama, otherwise known as Midnight, the 18+ only hero, who had dark purple almost black hair and large chest, wearing a thin red mask that framed her eyes, and a dominatrix-like outfit consisting of a black leotard over a light tan skinsuit, a belt hanging loosely around her waist, blue stockings, and black knee-high boots. Said woman blinked in confusion at what he called her before shaking it off and accepting the hand. "No harm done, and the name is Midnight, not Anko." "My bad," the whiskered blonde said, pulling Midnight back up to her feet with a single tug before scratching the back of his head with a sheepish grin. "You look a lot like her." "Oh really, is that so?" the sexually dressed woman asked in a sultry tone as she leaned in close to the whiskered blonde, intentionally smooshing her large breasts together as she did. She just loved teasing young men like this, their flustered expressions were always so amusing, and it admittedly did boost her vanity just a tiny bit to know she could incite such reactions so easily. "Yeah, you guys could practically be sisters, you're even dressed kinda like her," so imagine her surprise when Naruto just smiled back casually, not even the smallest blush on his cheeks as he spoke. "All you're missing is mesh armor, a trench coat, and ponytail." "Ah." That was all Midnight could say, dumbfounded by the blonde's complete and utter lack of reaction. "Hey, do you happen to know where the bathroom is?" Naruto asked, snapping the woman out of her daze as he hopped in place. I really need to go. I can see that, unable to help herself, Midnight giggled softly as she watched the boy do the age-old potty dance before jabbing her thumb over her shoulder towards a plain door with a blue man icon painted on it in the hallway she'd just come. It's right over there, kid. Oh thank Kami. Naruto exclaimed happily, shooting past the woman in a blur of motion before she could finish and vanishing through the door. Ah. What the? Crash. However, not even a second later, the whiskered blonde came flying back out and crashing through the wall, taking the door down in the process. The cause for this was quickly revealed a moment later when a very angry woman with dark tanned skin, pure white hair, and a pair of long bunny ears came marching out. And stay out you damn pervert. She yelled, her arms crossed as she glared at Naruto's groaning form before seeing Midnight standing nearby. Hey Nemuri, can you believe this moron? Thinking he can get away with barging into the women's restroom like that in the middle of a police station. Mirko, the 18+ only hero started as she pointed to the now named Mirko's side, getting the bunny woman to look over and see a door with a pink female icon a few feet away. That's the women's restroom, you're in the men's room. Oh, so I am, Mirko muttered as her anger rapidly changing to awkward sheepishness. Her gaze drifted back to Naruto as the whiskered blonde got back up with a scowl, a large rabbit foot-shaped bruise forming on his face and a noticeable stain on his pants. Oops. You made me piss myself, Naruto stated in a menacing tone while cracking his knuckles. I'm gonna kick your ass. Present. What the hell? Namasa exclaimed as he, Mount Lady, and Eraserhead came rushing down the hall from the observation room to find the police station utterly wrecked. Walls were smashed apart, craters littered the floor, several things were on fire, and a large chunk of the ceiling was missing. Despite all this however, all three of them were focused on the middle of the room, where Naruto and Mirko could be seen duking it out, the former throwing blinding fast punches and kicks that the latter would counter with equally speedy strikes of her own. Meanwhile, Midnight was standing off to the side with several parts of her outfit torn off, letting a thick pink gas oozed from her exposed skin and wafted towards the battling pair. It didn't do much good though, as the raw concussive force from each exchange of blows kept blasting the stuff back before it could even get close. Hey guys, sorry about the mess, she said upon seeing them, hurrying over towards them while stopping her quirk before they could be affected by it, not like it had been doing her any good anyway. I've tried to break them up, but I just can't get close enough to do anything. Why are those two fighting? Eraserhead asked, not too concerned since Midnight was obviously not concerned, or she'd be right in the fray as well, rather off to the side talking to them. Mirko used the men's room by accident and pissed the boy off in more than one way when she literally kicked him out when he tried to go in. The adult-rated heroine explained, making the scruffy man to facepalm, while Mount Lady couldn't help but giggle and Namasa's sighed in exasperation. Whatever, I'm putting a stop to this. Eraserhead said dully as he stared directly at the battling duo while his eyes started to glow red and his hair stood up, showing that he had activated his quirk erasure, which could completely negate most quirks with just a look. However, to his surprise, while Mirko became much slower the instant his gaze settled on her, Naruto was somehow completely unaffected. The whiskered blonde ended up turning this to his advantage as he caught the weakened bunny woman's kick and used that hold to fling her into the air. Page Bunshin no Jutsu. 4 copies of the blonde appeared in puffs of smoke, perfectly surrounding the white tea as she fell back to earth. What followed next was a complete and total beatdown in the span of 3 seconds before the clones dispelled and the original charged in with a tiny blue ball of energy spinning in his grasp that he promptly slammed into the woman's gut. Chibi Rasengan. All Mirko could do was gasp in pain as the sphere drilled against her stomach, the fabric of her outfit instantly getting shredded apart and the flesh underneath started to twist into a spiral before the attack burst, sending her crashing through one of the few remaining intact walls. Crouching slightly afterwards in preparation, Naruto was just about to sprint after Mirko to keep the brawl going, only to end up jumping backwards to avoid the grey cloths that suddenly tried to grab him. Jerking his head towards the source of the attack while reaching for his kunai pouch on reflex, the blonde froze upon seeing the trio of heroes and detectives staring at him, their presence snapping the teen out of his anger. I'm in more trouble now, aren't I? Later. The spites. Naruto grumbled, now seated on in the corner seat of a nice leather couch inside a moderately sized and somewhat plain apartment. The only decoration really consisting of some basic furniture, a few photos and news clippings on walls, various home exercise equipment, and a decent flat-screen television. However, the more noticeable thing would be the interesting new accessory currently around the blonde's neck. It was a black collar, strapped firmly in place against his jugular with a small black box attached to the side that had a blinking green light. No kidding, Mirko, or Rumi as she was known off-duty, said with a scowl of her own from the other side of the couch, a pile of blankets topped with a pillow acting as a divider between the two, idly scratching at her own collar in annoyance with one hand, while the other held an ice pack to her injured stomach. She was out of her hero outfit and instead was wearing a plain grey t-shirt and a pair of loose blue sweatpants. I can't believe this bull, they put me, the 5th best hero of Japan, under fucking house arrest. Do you know how long everyone's going to hold this over my head for? As punishment for destroying the police station during their brawl, both Naruto and Rumi were put under house arrest for the next few months. At least you aren't the one stuck with a babysitter. Naruto said with an annoyed huff. Since he had no known address nor legal identification, or at least not one recognized by the Japanese government, he had been put under the bunny hero's care for the time being, something neither of them were really happy about. And whose fault is that exactly? Rumi asked rhetorically, a smirk on her lips at the blonde's apparent misery. However, it was quickly wiped away when his gaze snapped towards her with a withering glare. Last I checked, yours. What did you say? Rumi demanded, pushing the pile of blankets aside and grabbing the boy's shoulders as she got right in his face with a scowl of her own. You heard me, Naruto said without hesitation, closing the remaining distance between them so his forehead was pressing against the bunny woman's, their eyes just centimeters apart as they glared at each other. You were the one who made me piss myself. You barged in on me in the bathroom. It was the men's bathroom. This went on for several minutes, with the pair throwing retorts and counter-remarks at each other, while their tempers steadily rose higher and higher until both were ready to start throwing down again. However, just as they were about to start another brawl, their fists raised and everything, both paused and glanced down at the collar on the other's neck before reluctantly letting their fists lower. Wrestle for it. Naruto suggested after a moment of awkward silence. Thinking over briefly, Rumi's frown quickly turned into a wicked grin as she nodded, her grip noticeably tightening on the whiskered blonde as she did. Works for me. Meanwhile, outside the apartment. You know putting these two together like this is just asking for trouble, Nemuri stated as she and Aizawa were walking down a plain hallway in their civvies and the latter carrying a few shopping bags in his arms loaded with clothes. They're probably already at each other's necks again. Probably. The scruffy man said blandly with an uncaring shrug. Beating the crap out of each other. Aha. Causing severe collateral damage. Most likely. And making the boy show off more of his abilities. I was wondering when you'd stop dancing around the subject. Aizawa stated as the adult-themed heroine gave him a dirty look. So you were doing this just to satisfy your own curiosity? She demanded accusingly. Just as much as you are, the erasure hero shot back with a don't bullshit me look. He by all accounts doesn't exist and claims to be from a place that no one has heard of, displaying the capabilities of multiple quirks, including an immunity to mine, yet has no quirk factor to speak of. That boy is a conundrum wrapped up in a mystery that we both intend to unravel. That's true, but Mirko is also the most capable pro-hero we currently have available for this task, Aizawa cut Nemuri off as the door to Rumi's apartment came into view. Besides, you said whole argument was just because of a misunderstanding, so they might actually get along now that they've had time to let their tempers settle. Fine, the 18+ only hero said with a sigh, unable to argue against the tired-looking man's words. Instead, she simply kept walking until they reached the rabbit hero's doorway and reached for the doorknob, pausing momentarily when the slab of wood shook slightly. So much for getting along, $5 as they're arguing about whose fault it is. Just open the door. Aizawa said in his usual dull tone. Alright, I am, Nemuri muttered with a roll of her eyes as she did just that. Hey guys, we're bae. She trailed off almost as soon as she started speaking, her jaw hanging loosely and her eyes threatening to pop out of her sockets as Aizawa simply blinked in surprise as they stared into the apartment. What did they see that was so shocking, you may ask? Come on. Is that the best you got, blondie? You gotta work harder than that. Rumi's voice yelled out from a writhing pile of blankets and limbs on the floor as grunts and moans filled the air. You want harder? Naruto's voice yelled back, his and Bunny Woman's red and sweating faces bursting out of the pile as they stared at each other with identical competitive grins. I'll give you harder. And like that the pair vanished into the pile of fabric again as it started shifting around even more wildly, the grunting intensifying as it did. Watching this go on for a solid minute, neither Nemuri's or Aizawa's expressions changed as the former slowly pulled the door back shut. Well, I guess they get along after all. End chapter. Chapter 3. Last time. And like that the pair vanished into the pile of fabric again as it started shifting around even more wildly, the grunting intensifying as it did. Watching this go on for a solid minute, neither Nemuri's or Aizawa's expressions changed as the former slowly pulled the door back shut. Well, I guess they get along after all. And now, several minutes later. Oh, so you two were just wrestling, huh? Nemuri asked, taking a seat on a small recliner as she smirked at the red-faced and sweating duo who were once again sitting on either side of the couch, whether their flustered appearances were from their exertion or embarrassment unclear. I must say, that looked quite the intense session. Get your mind out of the gutter, you wannabe stripper, Rumi shot out with a sour look while wiping the sweat off her face with a rag, her ears twitching in irritation as the perplexed smirk widened. Did you honestly think we were doing that of all things? What do you take me for? Well, you are part rabbit. I will kick you. Aw, what's wrong, did someone miss their morning carrot? That's it. I'm gonna. Both of you stop it, Aizawa cut in, leaning against the front door while giving both women a dull glare before pinching the bridge of his nose with a tired sigh when Rumi flopped back down with a huff and Nemuri pouted. It was an easily mistaken situation, that's all there is to it, let's move on. Yes, please, let's. Naruto added in, his face looking ready to melt from how red it was as he did the exact opposite and avoided looking at either of the women. Be in spoil sport. The adult-themed heroine muttered with a nod as she kept pouting. However, internally she was grinning like a loon as she imagined all the future teasing she could do with this goldmine that had been dropped onto her. Good, now that has been dealt with, we can get back to the actual reason we are here. Walking over to the couch, the scruffy man abruptly dropped all the bags he was carrying onto Naruto's lap. Thanks. The whiskered blonde said unsurely as he idly peeked in a bag to see some t-shirts and jeans before blinking as a large stack of paperwork was set on top of the pile. What are those? High school enrollment papers, as always stated bluntly, rolling his eyes when he saw the teen freeze up upon hearing the word high school. I expect you to read through them and have made a choice by. Oh hell no. Naruto cut the man off while shoving everything on his lap onto the floor. There is no way you're making me go back to school, I already graduated from the academy back home. Is that so? Then would you mind showing me your diploma to prove that? Aizawa asked rhetorically, causing the blonde to pause again. As I thought, grabbing his scarf, the tired-looking man seemingly causally flicked his wrist causing the cloth to shoot out and wrap around the fallen paperwork. Then, with another flick, he hoisted said paperwork into his grasp and held it back out to the blonde. Without proof of graduation or a suitable legal reason, you are required by law as a minor to attend to some form of sanctioned educational courses. And I said no, I had enough of that classroom crap when I was 12, Naruto stated while smacking the papers aside, missing the looks he got from all the other occupants in the room. Besides, I'll probably be back home by tomorrow at the latest, so what's even the point? That question actually seemed to throw the scruffy hero for a loop as he didn't respond right away this time, seeming to contemplate what to say for a moment. Oof, however, during that moment, everyone's attention was snapped towards the small cloud of smoke that suddenly appeared in the middle of the room. Instantly on edge, Nemuri and Aizawa started to get in defensive stances. Only to end up blinking in confusion when they saw a basketball-sized red-skinned toad wearing a Yakuza jacket and holding a scroll in its hands. Ignoring the pair of confused stares, the amphibian idly looked around the room for a few moments before croaking happily when his gaze settled on Naruto. Senin-san, I have Hokage-sama's response from your last message. He said while holding the scroll out towards the whiskered teen. Sweet. Grinning widely, Naruto immediately took the offered roll of parchment and in turn gave the toad a small box of Pocky he had in his pocket. Thanks for helping me out, Gamakuchi. Of course, Senin-san ribbit, it was no problem. The now named Gamakuchi said with a bow as he eagerly munched on his newly acquired sweets before vanishing in another burst of smoke. What the hell just happened? Narumi and Aizawa unknowingly thought at the same time, question marks blinking around their heads as their eyes flickered from where the toad had vanished to Naruto as he unrolled the scroll and back again. Sure, both of them had seen just as weird or even weirder things than a talking toad appearing from thin air, but the sheer randomness of it just left them both baffled. That was faster than you said it would be, Rumi said before quirking a brow when she saw the other two pro-heroes' gazes to shift over to her. What? Is there something on my face? Toad, not surprised, why not? Nemuri asked bluntly while pointing to the empty space Gamakuchi had briefly inhabited. Oh that? Naruto said he has some blood contract thingy with toads, so he can call them to his side whenever he needs something, the rabbit woman explained with wave of her hand. He did so last night before we went to bed to send a message back home to tell some chick called Sue something what happened to him. This is probably her response. Ah, got it. The perplexed said with a nod as again, while strange it was definitely not the strangest thing she'd heard or seen. As the two women were chatting, Aizawa let his attention drift back to Naruto, though he did make sure to listen to the whole conversation and add toad summoning to his mental list of the blonde's abilities. However, upon noticing the annoyed look on the whiskered teen's face as his eyes darted all over the scroll, the scruffy hero found his curiosity piqued. Stepping over to Naruto's side and reading over the blonde's shoulder, a tiny victorious grin found itself worming its way onto Izawa's lips. Naruto, I don't know how the hell you manage to always get yourself into these messes, though I am glad that you are at least alright. We're working on figuring out what exactly happened this time and how to get you back, but it's probably gonna take a while, so for the meantime, I want you to behave yourself and try to learn whatever you can about where you ended up. And keep in touch, I want at least one report a day from you, even if it's just to tell me that you're still okay. Tsunade. P.S. I know it's probably pointless to say this, but at least try to stay out of trouble. I mean it, if I find out you did something super stupid again, I swear I'll punt your ass to the moon. So what were you saying about not needing to go to school? The tired hero asked, earning an exasperated sigh from Naruto as the blonde hung his head in defeat while he scrolled back up and stuffed it into his pocket. Just give me the stupid papers. He muttered grumpily, swiping the stack of enrollment sheets from the man before going over to and flopping onto the couch, slowly reading through the stack with a scowl while ignoring the smug look Rumi was now sending him. Good, my work here is done. Walking out the front door as he spoke, Izawa stopped just before closing the door and glanced back into the room. I have a feeling we will be seeing much of each other in the future, so a word of advice, don't waste my time again. Slam. I'm gonna prank him so badly. Naruto muttered under his breath after a brief silence. As amusing as that may be to see, I don't think you should be so upset with all scruffy McGrumps, Nemuri said as she stood up from her seat and headed for the door as well. He may act all cold and mean, but he's just trying to help out in his own way at least. And what way would that be? The way of the complete jackass. The whiskered blonde asked sarcastically, causing both women to burst out in laughter. Now that's a burn. Rumi chuckled out while slapping her thigh. Hahaha, yeah, pretty much, the perplet said between fits of giggles, wiping a tear from her eye as she struggled to get her breathing back under control. Anyway, I have to get going as well, got patrols to walk, criminals to arrest, stuff like that. See you both later. And with that she was gone as well, leaving the blonde and white tea pair all alo. Oh, and before I forget, Nemuri said as the door popped open and her head peeked through with a mischievous grin. I call dibs on being the godmother. Slam. And with that the perplet was actually gone, leaving a stunned and brightly blushing Naruto and Rumi to gape at the doorway for several moments. She's never gonna let that go, is she? Naruto asked once he snapped out of his shock. No, she will not, Rumi groaned out miserably, her blush already faded away as she palmed her face. I still don't get how they could think we were having sex though. I mean, come on, we literally just met each other last night. I know, and it's not like we were getting along, you made me piss myself for Kami's sake. Naruto added, earning a brief sour look from the bunny woman. I said I was sorry, she grumbled with a huff as she crossed her arms before suddenly smirking. Besides, even if we were doing that, there is no way some brat like you could get me that worked up. Now it was Naruto's turn to look annoyed as his head snapped around to send Rumi a scalding glare. What's that supposed to mean? Oh nothing, just that a cute little virgin boy like you would have more luck getting a rock aroused than me. The bunny-eared woman said haughtily. Eyebrow twitching rapidly as veins bulged on his forehead and his cheeks pure red, Naruto's hand shot out like a ricochet and grabbed Rumi's shirt before pulling her in close, so they were eye to eye. I'll have you know I spent 3 years learning under a self-proclaimed super pervert. Thanks to him and those stupid books he made me help him write, I know more ways to get a chick off than you have hair on your head. You would be the one struggling to even keep up. Knowledge means nothing without experience. And how much experience do you have, huh? That is none of your business. Ha. You're just saying that because you haven't gotten laid either, aren't you? What? I am not. Are so? Admitted virgin girl. That's it. I'm gonna snap you like a twig. Rumi yelled, tackling the blonde to the floor with a raised fist. 30 minutes of brutal pummeling and harsh insults later. Well, Rumi started with a groan in a slightly nasally voice as she laid on the floor of her now wrecked living room, her whole body covered in fresh bruises and a small trickle of blood oozing down her nostrils. Despite all that though, she had a big smile on her lips as she slowly turned her head to an equally battered Naruto, laying a few feet away. That was fun. If you say so, the whiskered blonde muttered tiredly, massaging the side of his jaw while spitting out a mouthful of blood. I think you knocked some of my teeth out. Definitely got at least one of them, the bunny woman stated, raising her fist up to show the incisor embedded in her knuckles, which Naruto plucked free before stuffing back in its rightful spot in his mouth. Gross, you know that has my blood on it. I've dealt with worse, Naruto said with a shrug as he sat up and slowly got back on his feet. Stumbling a bit until he managed to regain his bearings, the blonde shuffled over to the white tee and held out a hand. We good? Looking at the hand for a few seconds with a contemplative expression before nodding and taking the hand, a smile spreading across her lips as she was hoisted up to a standing position. Yeah, we're good. Great, the whiskered blonde said with a grin of his own, which quickly turned sheepish as he looked around at the thoroughly thrashed living room. Sorry about the mess. Meh, don't be, it's just as much my fault as it is yours, Rumi stated, waving off the teen's apology as she started to stretch a bit, several of her joints cracking loudly in the process. Besides, there's nothing quite like a good old-fashioned brawl to work out one's anger. None of that pansy-ass talking it out bull. Naruto couldn't help but nod in agreement, honestly feeling much better despite his many bruises and still missing tooth. That said, you are still helping me clean all this up. Fair enough, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. In a puff of smoke, 3 duplicates of the whiskered came into existence and quickly got to work tidying up the place. I almost forgot you could do that, Rumi said with a short chuckle before flopping onto the couch once the clones unflipped it, the original blonde joining her a few moments later after he reluctantly scooped up the discarded enrollment forms. So, any idea which school you're gonna go to? Preferably none of them, but that's not an option apparently. Naruto grumbled, earning another chuckle from the off-duty heroine. Amen to that, she said while leaning back in her seat. I was never much a fan of school myself, what with having to sit in those damnable uncomfortable chairs. All those stupid rules that are impossible to remember. The blonde added with a roll of his eyes. And forget the nosy teacher's pets always telling you what to do. Rumi muttered, earning a nod of agreement from Naruto. Or the teachers themselves, like the ones that act all snobby and treat you like an idiot just because you made a single mistake. Ugh, those are the worst, yet still nowhere near as bad as those boring lectures that just never seemed to end. Naruto and Rumi said at the same time with simultaneous groans as they seemed to deflate in their seats, just the memory of said lectures being enough to sap their energy. After a moment though, Rumi popped back up like a spring as she swiped the papers from Naruto and looking through them before tossing all but one of them over her shoulder. You should definitely go with this one. She said while handing the last pamphlet back to the whiskered blonde. Quirking a brow, Naruto glanced at the forms curiously, just long enough to learn that the name of the school was UA, before returning his attention back to the bunny woman with a look of mild suspicion. Why? Well for one, it's the best damn hero school in the country, not to mention way more fun than regular schools, and with my recommendation, you are practically guaranteed a spot. Rumi stated factually, gotta love those perks as a top 10 hero. Okay, that great and all but. And did I forget to mention that Aizawa just so happens to work there as a teacher? The YT cut Naruto off with a mischievous grin, causing the blonde to pause for a moment before an identical smirk spread across his own lips. You got a pen? Meanwhile. But you damn it. Standing just outside a large H-shaped building wrapped up in a large yellow sleeping bag, Aizawa grumbled quietly under his breath as he wiped his nose. My annoyance senses tingling, that brat must have signed up for here after all. It was what he'd been hoping for sure, but that didn't stop the feeling of dread the man felt as he went off to get ready for the no doubt many headaches that were to come in the school year. End chapter. Chapter 4. Last time. But you damn it. Standing just outside a large H-shaped building wrapped up in a large yellow sleeping bag, Aizawa grumbled quietly under his breath as he wiped his nose. My annoyance senses tingling, that brat must have signed up for here after all. It was what he'd been hoping for sure, but that didn't stop the feeling of dread the man felt as he went off to get ready for the no doubt many headaches that were to come in the school year. And now, a week later. La da 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 get a look at me la da 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 free as a bunny Rumi sang slightly off key as she walked up the steps to her floor, a small shopping bag held in one arm, whilst she twirled a certain tracking collar around with her free hand. La da 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 early release be my gift la da da dum for my hard work and extra shift. So into her tune, the rabid heroine didn't even bother saying hi to Nemuri as she passed, the perplet going the same way she was. Well, somebody seems to be in a good mood. The adult-themed heroine stated curiously, her arms crossed behind her head as she walked alongside the cheerful rabbit woman. Of course I'm in a good mood, I finally don't have to wear this blasted thing anymore. As she spoke, Rumi grinned victoriously while clenching the collar in her grasp, the plastic and metal crumbling slightly under the pressure. I swear this was so annoying, especially when I was trying to sleep. I can imagine, Nemuri said with a nod, briefly glancing at the white tee's neck where she could see a faint tan line from the collar surrounded by small red patches and a few scratch marks. You're a pretty good singer by the way, ever consider trying out professionally? You never know, maybe you're Japan's next great superhero pop star. Stopping briefly at the perplexed words, Rumi couldn't help but shiver uncomfortably before making an over-exaggerated gagging sound. Ugh, and have to possibly deal with even more creepy fans, no thank you. I already get enough of those already as it is. Fair enough. The adult-rated heroine agreed with a nod. All the fame and all was nice, being a top hero had some rather annoying drawbacks, and one of the topmost ones either of them could think of were their self-proclaimed superfans. Unlike regular fans, which aside from being a bit overly persistent at times are generally pretty alright, these were the ones who practically embody all the bad stereotypes of a fanbase. It was something all heroes dealt with. For example, Nemuri herself had to have 6 restraining orders filed just over the last year. But for Rumi, with her quirks appeal and her top 5 rating, it meant she had to deal with an extra large helping of this craziness. The YT can't even begin to count how many times she's received supportive letters from fans on how they saw her pent-up needs and desires, but wanted to protect her public image or were willing to help with her inner ravenousness. It really drove her up the wall in rage at times, and don't even get her started on the fanart. "Why are you here?" Rumi asked her fellow heroine in an attempt to change the subject. "Shouldn't you be getting lesson plans ready for the new school year or something?" "Finished them yesterday and it's my day off today, so I don't really got anything to do," Nemuri waved the question off before grinning at the YT. "So, I figured I'd pop in and see how things were going on over here. Roommate life treating you well?" "Meh, it's going alright so far," Rumi stated plainly with a shrug, missing the disappointed look that flashed across her friend's face. "Really? You got your own little stud living with ya, and it's just alright?" the perplexed asked in a hinting tone as she nudged the rabbit woman's side. "Come on girl, I want details. Any awkward accidents? Arguments about chores? Walk in on each other in the shower?" "For the love of should have seen that coming," Rumi sighed irritably as she listened to her fellow pro hero list off different scenarios and suggestions, most of which sounded like they'd been ripped out of a cheesy sitcom. "No, nothing like that happened with Naruto. It's actually been pretty boring these last few days." Being the physically active person that she is, the bunny-eared woman really didn't have much in the form of indoor entertainment, a few streaming subscriptions, basic internet service, some workout gear, and an old board gym she got as a present being about it. And even then, a good chunk of time had to be taken up with filling her new roommate in unimportant, yet incredibly boring, things such as quirk laws. "Ah phooey, you're no fun at all," Nemuri muttered with a defeated pout at Rumi's bland response. "At least tell me you got to know him more. And that all those romance mags I slipped in your mail weren't a total waste." What? She loved playing matchmaker, and her romance sense was telling her that these two would really hit it off. "Maybe just a little bit," the rabbit heroine said cheekily with a chuckle at the pleading puppy dog eyes she got from the perplexed before deciding to finally throw her a bone or two. "Naruto really likes ramen, like almost obsessively, and is not a morning person at all. Oh, and he's scared of ghosts, found that out when we watched Ghostbusters the night before yesterday. You should have seen it, he literally sprang up onto the ceiling like a cat when the librarian ghost transformed." That must have been hilarious," Nemuri said, giggling as she pictured the scene in her head, whilst Rumi nodded with a smirk. "No kidding, honestly I almost pissed myself from laughing too hard when I heard the girly shriek he gave." "I can imagine," the mature rated heroine muttered amusedly before suddenly adopting a thoughtful expression. "By the way, I thought Whiskers was supposed to be getting his citizenship sorted out today. Shouldn't you be with him given you're his legal guardian at the moment?" Naruto was technically an illegal alien after all, which meant that by all means he should be getting the boot from the country from day one. Thankfully though, while it was still a rather tedious process overall, immigration had become relatively easier since the rise of quirks and many of the age-old prejudices of the pre-quirk era started crumbling away. After all, once basically everyone around the world started sprouting tails, spitting fire, or literally turning purple, it wasn't exactly easy to define things like a person's race or ethnicity anymore. A good example of this would be All Might, one of Japan's greatest and revered societal icons despite looking, acting, and even sounding just like an American most of the time. Plus, there was the fact he had not one, not two, not even three, but 4 pro heroes vouching for him, along with some other support from a few other parties, so it was doubtful that there would be much of an issue. "And get stuck sitting through all that boring bureaucratic red tape bullshit, yeah no thank you," Rumi stated blandly while shaking her hands and head in the ever-classic fuck that shit pose. "I'd rather have to deal with the crazy fans, at least than I get to punch something. Plus, I had an appointment of my own, otherwise known as having this infernal collar taken off." "Yeah, should have figured that," Nemuri thought with her dull expression, though hers was more towards herself for asking the question in the first place. "So who went with him then?" "Azawa." "Nah, all Scruffy is still busy with the aftermath of the Kifuku incident, so Mount Lady took him instead." As Rumi spoke, a small tinge of sourness made its way into her tone. "Yesterday, a 2-bit drug addict with high-velocity cannons in his shoulders tried robbing a hospital for his next fix and ended up causing tons of property damage in the process until a racer had arrested him. That wouldn't have been so bad if it hadn't also been right smack dab in the middle of the rabbit heroine's turf and thus should have been her laying the beat down on that idiot. She could have totally taken him down in 5 seconds flat, but no, she had to be under damn house arrest, so now a whole hospital was out of commission and hundreds of patients had to be transferred to other locations." Alright, right, almost forgot about that mess, Midnight muttered with a nod while thinking to herself. Can't say I saw that coming, though that would explain why I haven't seen her milking the crowds for attention at all today. Speaking of messes, you think Naruto's gotten into any trouble yet? Rumi asked jokingly as she rubbed her chin in mock thought. I don't know about you, but I can just tell that guy is a magnet for trouble, especially if all those letters from home have anything to say about it. I wouldn't doubt it, the adult-themed heroine agreed with a giggle. But seriously, they're just going down to the embassy to sign some paperwork. What kind of trouble could they possibly get into? You're a dumbass. Rumi stated blandly after several seconds of total silence, earning a stunned and confused look from Nemuri right. Excuse me? Did you really have to say that? You know that only an idiot says something like what could possibly go wrong, the rabbit woman continued while fixing her companion with a dull glare. Realizing what she was talking about, Nemuri couldn't help but roll her eyes and shake her head with an amused chuckle. Oh come on Mirko, we're grown adults, you can't honestly still believe in that old superstition. If anything happens I swear I'm gonna punch you. Was all Rumi said in response. Yeah, sure, whatever you say, the sultry Perplet said with a dismissive wave of her hand as they finally arrived at the rabbit woman's door. I'm just quivering in my. Nemuri ended up trailing off mid-sentence the moment Rumi opened her door, both of their eyes widening in shock and perfect WTF expressions appearing their faces. Why? Naruto could be found sitting on the couch, a look of tired resignation on his face and a scratch on his cheek that was slowly fading out of view while Yu was over in the kitchen area, grabbing a fresh ice pack from the freezer for the bad black eye she has. Now that alone was odd enough, but then there were the two other people in the apartment as well, sitting on either side of Naruto. To the whiskered blonde's left was a lovely middle-aged woman who could almost pass as Rumi's sister, with shoulder-length pure white hair, pale skin, and light brown eyes, in a slightly tattered and messy white gown, which seemed oddly familiar to the Perplet. She appeared to have been crying recently due to her bloodshot puffy eyes and was half-heartedly eating some sushi, whilst Naruto rubbed her back in a supporting manner. Meanwhile, on his left was a teen girl about his age with straw blonde hair done up in two buns, wearing a slightly baggy school uniform. Oddly enough though, her arms and legs were bound in place by thin metallic wire, along with a rather nasty road rash on the side of her face, leaving only her hands free to wiggle around at her waist. Despite this however, said girl didn't seem to care at all, or rather looked blissfully content with a deep blush on her cheeks and lolled eyes as she sucked on Naruto's thumb. No seriously, she was literally sucking on his thumb like a freaking toddler, whilst trails of saliva and what looked suspiciously like blood slowly oozed down her lips. Hey Army, hey Midnight-san, how's it going? Naruto asked once he saw the new arrivals, before gesturing towards the ladies on either side. And before you ask, I do have an explanation for this. While Wham Midnight started to say something only to be cut off when Mirko suddenly smacked her right in the face with a surprise backhand, sending the adult-rated heroine flying back into the hall. Start from the beginning. The rabbit heroine stated while flopping down on a nearby recliner, ignoring the stunned looks she was getting from everyone else in the room. Earlier that day. Ugh, I am so glad that's over with. Naruto groaned as he and Yu stepped out of a government building, the former rolling his wrist with an annoyed grimace whilst the latter rubbed her eyes sleepily. You and me both, Yu muttered, yawning and stretching before sighing in relief as her joints popped audibly. I swear these guys just love boring the hell out of people because they got it down to an art. No kidding Tobeo, but at least it's over with, the whiskered blonde said optimistically as he patted his pocket where his new residence visa was. It was only a temporary one which would expire in a few months, but by then he would hopefully have a permanent one approved or something like that, he kinda zoned out at the end there. So, are we heading back now? Not quite, let's get something to eat first, I'm starving here, Yu said while rubbing her stomach as it growled softly in protest of its emptiness before grabbing Naruto's arm and walking along. There's a nice little sushi joint just a few blocks from here, we can grab some to go. Feeling more than a bit peckish himself, Naruto nodded in agreement and let the older blonde drag him along. Sounds good to me. Sure enough, after a few minutes of walking they arrived at the aforementioned sushi stand, a quaint little thing on the corner with a nice welcoming feel to it. Better yet, the place was pretty much empty at the time, so the pair didn't have to wait long for to make their orders. During that time, the two blondes idly chatted, tossing a few jokes back and forth about their first meeting and even a few funny stories of their pasts. And so, while everyone else was having their lunch, I snuck up on Kiba and nailed him with a balloon filled with catnip and tuna before letting loose a box full of cats I'd caught earlier. You should have seen it, the guy was scrambling all over the place for an hour trying to get away from them. Speaking of which. Hahaha, that must have been hilarious. Yu exclaimed between fits of giggles as Naruto finished telling her of a prank he pulled on Kiba in revenge for when the dog boy spiked his instant ramen with hot sauce. Hell yeah it was, especially after he finally noticed that Akamaru wasn't helping him because I bribed him with a steak, or that his sis had showed up and was taking pictures of the whole thing, Naruto added with a smirk, getting the gigantism quirk user to double over in laughter. Apparently she even put one up in their living room, but I've never seen it. Back in Konoha. Why? One Kiba Inuzuka demanded in horror as he stared at a slightly tattered picture of him as a child covered in green powder and chunks of tuna fish, whilst dozens of cats clambered over him, some of which had gotten into his jacket and one on his head, proudly on display on the wall. Of all the things that were salvaged, why did this have to be one of them? Why? And back. Heh, remind me never to get on your bad side. You said once. She managed to settle down, wiping a tear from her eye while accepting a pair of wrapped boxes from the man at the counter. You should if you know what's good for you, Naruto stated in a mock-serious tone and fixing his fellow blonde with a goofy glare before both of them started laughing again. Speaking of bad sides though, we should really start heading back to the apartment before I get in trouble with the police again. Oh, you worry too much, the busty blonde said with a dismissive wave of her hand. You'll be fine as long as I'm around, I am a pro hero after all. Besides, we just stopped to get some lunch, how much trouble could you get into? As soon as those words left Yu's lips, all forms of humor suddenly vanished from Naruto's face as he stared at the woman with a complete deadpan that slightly unnerved her. What? Is there something on my face? You just had to say it, didn't you? The whiskered blonde asked in a completely dull tone. You just had to go and jinx us. It took a moment, but the light bulb finally clicked on in the pro hero's brain after she thought over what she said before laughing slightly nervously. Don't be so dramatic, Naruto, that's just a silly super style. Heads up. Wham! A voice suddenly shouted out, cutting you off and getting both blondes to snap their attention to the side just in time for the gigantism quirk user's face to become intimately familiar with a soccer ball, knocking her right on her ass. Catching the black and white ball as it bounced back into the air, Naruto idly tossed it back to the group of kids that were playing with it while staring down at the downed heroine, his expression unchanged. You were saying? Back to the present. PFFFFT. Ha 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 ha. Nemuri fell out of her chair clutching her gut, one of the wads of tissue popping out of her bruised nose as she kicked her legs in the air. Ha ha ha. She wasn't the alone in her amusement either as Rumi giggled uncontrollably while pounding her fist on the arm of her chair so hard it started to crack. Oh shove it will ya, it wasn't that funny. You grumbled while glaring at the two laughing women, only to be completely ignored. Anyway, Naruto continued. After that I helped you over to a nearby park bench and… A few minutes after the soccer accident. Ugh, great, this is gonna take forever to go away, you groaned while sinking onto the bench, pressing a plastic cup full of ice against her swollen eye, a bruise already starting to form around it. This proves nothing by the way. Yeah, just keep telling yourself that. The whiskered blonde retorted with an amused eye roll before taking in the surrounding park. It wasn't very large, maybe 2 blocks at most, but made up for it with a lush variety of plants and trees. Inhaling deeply, he couldn't help but smile wistfully and lean back on the bench with a sigh, earning a raised brow from his fellow blonde. What's up with you? You sound like you got something on your mind. Nah, just feeling a bit homesick I guess. Naruto said with a shrug as his gaze drifted upwards. Alright, you muttered while nodding in understanding, knowing all about the boy's literally otherworldly origins before adopting a curious expression. If you don't mind me asking, what is your home like? Honestly, it's in a bit of a mess right now, Naruto said bluntly, making the heroine blink in surprise and confusion until he continued. A man named Nagato, a villain as you'd call him, attacked a few weeks ago and ended up wrecking the place pretty badly. Thankfully everyone made it out alright, but he literally leveled almost every part of the village. Damn, he must have been pretty tough. The black-eyed blonde said with a grimace from picturing a single guy demolishing a whole town single-handedly. You have no idea. Was all the whiskered blonde said in response, subconsciously rubbing his hands where they had been impaled with chakra rods. Loath as he did to admit it, but it had been a close fight, one that could have gone either way at the tiniest of slip-ups. And if that wasn't bad enough, he still had to worry about the rest of the Akatsuki and their true leader Toby possibly attacking again while he's stuck in another universe dimension whatever he was in. A silence fell over the pair after that, with Yu unsure how to go past what was no doubt a very sore subject and Naruto just not feeling like talking anymore. So instead, the former began to awkwardly help herself to her sushi whilst the latter kept staring up at the sky with a 1,000-yard stare. However, after a minute or so and unnoticed by the heroine next to him, the whiskered blonde's eyes suddenly closed and he became utterly still, with not even the rising of his chest able to be seen. The reason for this was revealed a few moments later though as a familiar orange coloration formed around Naruto's eyes. Man, I don't know if I'm ever gonna get used to this. He thought as his sage mode enhanced senses picked up the literal thousands of people all around him. It simply astounded him how many different people could live all crammed up together in one place as he sieved through the tidal waves of different life energies. This was something he had started doing every few hours after his second day staying with Rumi, partially to improve his focus so as to avoid being overwhelmed like he had when he first got here, but mostly it was just something to do so he wouldn't die of absolute boredom. That said though, he had made a few interesting discoveries about Sage Mode, such as how he could sort of feel what kind of quirk someone had. For example, his roommate Rumi had a similar life signature to that of a rabbit, while their neighbor a few rooms down, who had hair made of actual charcoal, had an earthen feel to him. However, the most interesting thing he discovered was HMPH. Naruto's eyes snapped open suddenly before his head jerked to the side, his now golden-toed eyes focused onto a teen girl passing by one end of the park. She was a pretty if not a bit bland at first glance, with short brown hair and an eye patch covering one eye and a simple green and white school uniform, appearing to simply be enjoying a casual walk. Despite this though, the whiskered blonde's gaze never wavered as he tracked her progress, his eyes narrowing as his senses locked onto the two life signatures within the girl's body. One was the girl herself, but the other was, he didn't know what it was, but it wasn't there for a good reason if the pure unfiltered tidal wave of despair, fear, and desperation he felt from the former said anything. Oh yeah, the other discovery he made was that he could sense emotions in Sage Mode, but generally only if he focused all of his attention really hard on a single individual. So the fact this girl caught his attention without him even trying was one hell of a red flag. Focusing on her more intently, Naruto's lips fell into a frown upon seeing the way the foreign presence was encroaching the girl within herself and feeling the malicious intent literally oozing from it. "I need to go take a piss," he said bluntly while standing up, ignoring the grossed out retort he got about not saying that kinda stuff while I'm eating. From his fellow blonde as he headed towards the public restrooms that were across the park. Once he rounded the corner though to where the doors would be, and thus out of sight, the whiskered blonde vanished in a static blur. Kuin was having a pretty good day so far, her new host body had finally been overtaken completely, she had her cover stories all ready to go, and according to the labs, the new strain of trigger they'd been working on would be ready for testing soon. So all in all, there was nothing for her to complain about. Swoosh. What the fuck? The one-eyed teen couldn't help but ask aloud when she blinked and suddenly found herself no longer at the edge of the park she walked past each day to and from school. Instead she was in the middle of dank grimy back alley, pinned against cold brick by a pair of kunai in her jacket, while an unknown whisker-faced toad-eyed guy loomed over her. "I don't know what the hell you are, but you've got 5 seconds to get out of this girl's body or else," he stated while staring right into her eye with such intensity that it made her whole body lock up in terror. What? He knows. How? Kuin thought in disbelief, shock flooding through her at being called out by some random nobody that neither she or her current host had ever met before. Look sir, see clearly you've 3 seconds. Naruto cut her attempt at bullshitting off as he raised his hand up, a soft blue glow starting to form around it, which for some reason caused a huge amount of dread to flood through the one-eyed girl. Starting to really panic, Kuin quickly tried to think of a way out of whatever was happening before grinning sadistically as one idea popped out to her. "Fine, you got me, but what are you gonna do about it? If you try to force me out or turn me in, something dreadful could happen to this innocent little." "Time's up." And just like that, her smugness was gone as this guy completely disregarded her bluff and moved his glowing hand towards the top of her head. As it got closer, that same feeling of dread kept growing and growing, an unending chill running down her spine and sweat pouring from her brow as her instincts told her that she needed to get away from whatever the hell that was, now. Squelch b z z z z z z z z z z z z z finally, just as the hand touched the top of her head and this sense of impending doom spiked 1,000-fold, Kuin couldn't take it anymore. The patch covering her eye was shredded off in a burst of blood to reveal quite possibly the fattest and most ugly bee Naruto had ever seen being carried by a swarm of smaller ones. The disgusting thing tried flee, but unfortunately only managed to get about a foot until Naruto held up his other hand to cut them off, which had been behind his back this whole time, and revealed a familiar ball of spiraling chakra in his grasp. Faster than the swarm could react, he shoved it right into the middle of the swarm before it quadrupled in size, engulfing every single one of the insects before they even had a chance to react. A few moments later he let the Rasengan and the Kai lace chakra in his other hand fade, thus revealing the sickening pile of shredded chitinous pulp that used to be the bees as it fell to the ground with a splat. With that taken care of though, the blonde still had one major problem to take care of as he swiftly freed the now unconscious and bleeding girl from the wall, catching her in his arms as she fell free. "Great, now how am I going to explain this to you?" Naruto wondered while checking the girl's pulse to find it slow but steady, missing as her one good eye fluttered open for a few moments before both vanished in a static blur. "Screw it, I'll just wing it." Exactly 10 seconds later, everyone in a 3-block radius would find themselves flinching as a deafening cry of "what the absolute fuck" rang out from the park. Present time. So let me see if I got this straight, Nemuri started as her brow rose into her hairline as she stared at Naruto with a mixture of disbelief and dumbfoundedness. "You went to the bathroom and just found an unconscious young girl with one of her eyes gouged out?" "Yep," the whiskered blonde said with a nod, having told the group the edited version of the story because he doubted they'd like the whole grabbing a girl off the streets and dragging her into an alley. He may be an idiot, but even he knew that would be considered a big no-no, no matter if it was for a good reason or not. "After making sure she was still breathing, I brought her to you and she called someone to take her to the hospital. Thankfully Ingenium was in the area from another job, so we didn't have to wait long for a pickup," you added. "He actually called me a few minutes before you guys got back to tell us she's been stabilized, though they're keeping her under for the time being, so her eye can heal a bit." "Okay then," Rumi muttered with a small nod before gesturing towards the still unknown woman and teen. "Then I'm guessing that after that is when you met Erm. Sorry I never asked, but what are your names?" "My apologies as well, it seems I've forgotten my manner," the white tee beside Naruto said in a polite and soft almost whispery tone of voice while bowing lightly. "My name is Rei Sekisetsu, it's a pleasure to meet you." "Don't worry about it, I'm Rumi Usagiyami," the bunny woman said while holding out her hand for a shake, which the now named Rei accepted, albeit a bit reluctantly. "Nemuri Kayama, the pleasure's all mine," Nemuri added in with a bow of her own. "And this is Toga," Naruto said dully while pointing at the girl who was still happily suckling on his thumb. "Huo." Toga mumbled around the digit while waving at the pair. "Anyway, back to where I was. Hair winding effect. Thanks for coming so quickly Ingenium," you said to a man clad in modernistic-looking knight armor as Naruto gingerly set the unconscious girl he was holding into the new guy's arms, some makeshift bandaging around her eye to staunch the bleeding. "It's no problem whatsoever," Ingenium said in what sounded like a jovial tone, though it was a bit hard to tell since his helmet distorted his voice slightly. "You can always count on me when somebody needs help. Now, if you'll excuse me." Not waiting for a response from the bruised blonde, the armored man zipped away at high speed, shrinking away into the distance and vanishing from view in just a few seconds. "Well, that was a thing," Naruto stated bluntly while wiping the blood off his hands with the bottom of his shirt. Yes it was," you agreed with a small nod before suddenly grabbing her fellow blonde's arm and dragging him away. "Let's get going before another thing happens." "Good idea." As the pair was leaving though, neither noticed as a nearby conveniently placed bush started to shake a bit before some leaves moved aside to reveal a pair of bright yellow eyes that were trained solely on Naruto, or more specifically, the hard-to-see red stain on his shirt. "Haha, he looks like a real cutie." About 5 minutes later. "I swear. I see a hero take even one step closer and this lady gets IT. You have got to be kidding me." Naruto and Yu said in sync as they found themselves standing behind a police line along with several dozen civilians as they watched an ongoing hostage situation. It seemed a trio of generic-looking goons in ski masks had decided to rob a mini-mart only to find their escape being cut off by the pro-heroes Kamui Woods and Death Arms, so they holed up in the store along with any unlucky patrons. As if that wasn't bad enough though, it just so happened that said mini-mart just so happened to be smack dab in the path Yu and Naruto needed to go through in order to get back to Rumi's apartment. The apparent leader of these goons, which we'll now dub GOON number 1, stood by the open doorway with one such patron, a woman with pure white hair and messy dress, yelling at the top of his lungs whilst a gun barrel poked out the middle of his palm against the hostage's chin. Meanwhile, GOON number 2 and GOON number 3 could be seen taking cover behind the checkout counter, the former having his hands turned into shotgun barrels aimed at the windows, and the latter had pistol barrels for fingers trained on a trio of teen boys cowering in a corner. "I blame you," Naruto told Yu bluntly as they were forced to wait while the two heroes and the police tried to resolve the situation, and based on how it was going so far. "You're surrounded. There is nowhere to go. Just turn yourselves in and we can sort this all out peacefully. How about you go fuck yourself instead? It was probably gonna take a while." "Oh come on, there is no way this is my fault," the gigantism quirk heroine said with an annoyed huff while crossing her arms, giving her fellow blonde the stink eye as he adjusted his grip on the confused white tee in his arms before turning back to the scene. "Wait, what?" Snapping her gaze back towards Naruto, Yu's eyes widened as she saw that sure enough, the hostage GOON number 1 had been threatening was being held in a bridal carry by the whiskered blonde, a baffled expression on her face as she looked around in confusion. Not only that, but the 3 boys that had been in the store as well were now a couple feet to their left now, looking equally confused. "What the fuck? How in the hell? Hey. What's the deal?" And for the cherry on top, all 3 of the would-be robbers were suddenly tied up together in a tight bundle by a thin metallic wire at the entrance of the mini-mart. "Whoa, what the heck?" So fast. Did you see that? See what? I blinked and it was over. What just happened? You think it was All Might? All Might? Where? I did see something yellow for a second, I think. Where is he then? Similar comments and whispers broke out all through the crowd as everyone tried to figure out what just happened, especially the heroes and police, as they awkwardly arrested the bound men. Hey, are you alright? The only exception to this was Naruto, whose attention at the moment was the woman in his arm as he gently set her back down on her own 2 feet, which was a bit tricky since the crowd decided to start dispersing now that the action was over. Huh? The white tee mumbled, her voice quiet and soft as she looked at her rescuer before the question finally registered in her mind. Oh, yes, I'm alright. Great, then would you mind letting me go then? The whiskered blonde asked, gesturing downwards where the woman's hand had reflexively clenched onto his shirt for support. Sorry. She stuttered sheepishly, quickly releasing her grip and backing away, only to end up tripping on a piece of rubbish on the ground and almost falling onto her rear until Naruto caught her arm. Whoa there, that was close, he said while pulling her back up, placing a hand on her back for added support as he helped her regain her bearings. However, in doing so, the boy got a good close-up look at the white tee's face, thus seeing the light redness that showed she'd been crying recently, along with the depression and regret within her gaze. Are you sure you're? Excuse me, a gruff and serious voice cut Naruto off, getting the pair to turn and see Death Arm standing before them with a bored and slightly annoyed look, arms crossed and everything. If you two are done flirting, I need to ask you both some questions. Oh boy. We're not flirting. Naruto exclaimed, putting some distance between himself and the woman as his face turned a bright red almost instantly while she simply blushed lightly with an embarrassed cough. Meanwhile, a few feet away, Yu was snickering to herself as she watched us go down, idly waving to a confused Kamui as he passed. Sure you weren't, the muscular hero said with an eye roll, obviously not believing the whiskered blonde, but not pushing further. Let's just cut to the chase, I need your names and quirks. Alright, sure, Naruto Uzumaki, energy manipulation. The blonde said, holding up a hand as a small marble-sized Rasengan formed for a few seconds. Rei to Sekisetsu, see Crimancy. The now-named Rei said quietly, stumbling on her words briefly while doing the same as the blonde, only her hand released a small cloud of cold mist that quickly evaporated. Nodding, the hero turned his sole attention towards the ice user, his stern gaze gaining some genuine concern as he looked her over. Are you injured in any way, ma'am? And no sir, just a bit shaken. Good, thank you for your time, you'll be notified if you are needed for further testimony. Death Arm stated before walking off, not so quietly grumbling under his breath about public displays of affection and time and place for things, getting the pair to burst into blushes again. Hey, fast forward. Wahahaha, Nemuri and Rumi had to lean on each other for support as they laughed uncontrollably while poor Naruto and Rei flushed in embarrassment, the former glowering at the laughing duo while the latter covered her rapidly reddening face with her hands. Even Yu was laughing, albeit not nearly as hard, just quietly giggling into her hand with a mischievous smirk. Yeah, laugh it up. The otherworldly blonde muttered dully, tapping the side of his chair in mild annoyance as he waited for the duo to calm back down. Oh, don't be such a grumpy pants, Nemuri said once she managed to get herself under control, mostly. Besides, I'd say all Smokey was onto something given the current situation, wouldn't you? However, instead of the reaction the R-rated heroine was expecting, Naruto simply tilted with a raised brow. What's that supposed to mean? Seriously, dude? Rumi asked incredulously at the blonde's obliviousness, which only grew when the blonde just kept staring at them in confusion. You said you weren't flirting with her, but then ended up bringing her home with you. Do the math. For the last time, we weren't flirting. Naruto exclaimed, a vein bulging on his forehead and his face turning deep scarlet as it finally clicked in his head. And that's not why I brought Rei-san here. She had nowhere else to go and I couldn't just let her sleep in the street. Excuse me? Nemuri asked while Rumi simply raised a brow. If I may, you know of the attack at Kifuku Medical yesterday? Rei asked, getting a pair of nods as the attention of the room to shift to her. I was a patient their psyche ward, but during the attack I and many others were forced to flee to safety. Ah, that's why that dress looks familiar, the perplete muttered as the metaphoric lightbulb went off in her head. The gown was a standard long-term residence outfit for hospital patients, made to be comfortable and functional, unlike the basic single-use ones that left your back exposed. So you just want to enjoy your freedom a bit. Oh no, nothing like that, I honestly tried to return right away once the villain was taken care of, the cryomancy quirk user stated with a shake of her head. Unfortunately the hospital's computers were destroyed during the attack and they couldn't find any hard copies of my files. I see. Nemuri said, a bit dubious still yet not seeing any signs of deceit from the white tee. She's telling the truth, I tried calling it in when she told us, you added as a small frown marred her lips. They said they're trying to get it sorted out, but until then there's nothing they can do for her. Yeah, and that was about the time we ran into Bloodthirsty here. Naruto added while pointing towards Toga, who finally let go of his thumb with a happy burb, revealing the small bleeding gash on the end of the digit and several bite marks. Ah hick, that was nice, she said with a grin while snuggling up against the whiskered blonde side. Thanks Nuri-chan, you are the bestiest bestie ever. Is she drunk? Nemuri, Rei, Yu, Naruto, and Rumi unknowingly thought at the same time as they watched a giggling and hiccuping girl, which combined with her deep blush and dazedly giddy expression, made her look completely hammered. If you say so, the whiskered blonde said unsurely while patting the top of the girl's head before turning his attention back to Nemuri and Rumi, who were staring at him intently. So yeah. Harry whined, 15 minutes after hostage incident. Alright seriously? There has to be, but alright, yes, thank you as well, Yu sighed in frustration as she hung up her cell phone, rubbing the side of her head in a vain attempt to stave off her coming headache. Well, that was a waste of 5 minutes of my life. I told you it wouldn't do any good, but thank you for trying, Takeyama-san. Rei said with a small bow which the gigantism quirk user waved off. They, along with a certain whiskered blonde, could be found walking along down a wide back alley that cut straight towards their current destination. It was the least I could do, and just call me Yu. Of course Yu-san. The white tee had just finished telling the pair of blondes about her situation after Naruto had asked why she was walking around barefoot in dirty clothes, prompting Yu to try and help. Sadly though, this was just one of those situations where all they could do was wait and see how it all turned out. Well, it was worth a shot at least, better to have tried and failed than never try at all, Naruto chipped in with his arms crossed behind his head. And don't worry Rei, like I said you can stay with me and Rumi until we can get everything all sorted out. Which I am grateful for Naruto-san, but I really wouldn't want to impose. Rei said softly as she turned away, before giving a quiet yep when Naruto patted her back with a supportive grin. It's really no problem at all, besides what kind of? Rei blinked in confusion when Naruto suddenly trailed off, his grin slipping away into a frown as his gaze flickered around the area. Naruto saw. The white tee started to ask, only to end up yelping in surprise when the whiskered blonde shoved her towards Yu right as a slender hand holding a knife zipped by his face, slicing open his cheek. Hi there. The owner of said hand, a smiling blonde girl with her hair done up in buns and a perpetual blush on her face, said in a cheery tone while swiping her blade at Naruto again, making him hop back to avoid getting cut again. I'm Toga. Let's be friends. I don't know how to reply to that. Naruto stated honestly, a question mark blinking above his head at his attacker's random statement, but that didn't stop him from avoiding the stab aimed for his gut or smacking Toga's hand away, knocking her blade out of her grasp and flying away in the process. Oopsie, looks like I got butterfingers, the blushing blonde said sheepishly before flicking her wrists and allowing 2 more knives previously hidden up her sleeves to slide into her grasp. Good thing I carry spares. Charging again, Toga feinted another stab to the gut and quickly slid to his right when he tried to block, slashing at his exposed elbow. Smack Ochi. Only for the whiskered teen to immediately smack her hand away again, once more launching her weapon off into the distance. Hey. That's no way to treat a pretty girl, mister. Says the one trying to stab me with a knife, Naruto retorted while grabbing her other hand when she tried to do just that and giving it a sharp twist, forcing her to drop her remaining weapon. Why are you even attacking me anyway? Instead of answering, the blushing blonde suddenly moved in closer and grabbed his other hand with her free one and with an impressive display of dexterity, flipped herself onto his shoulders. This is fun, I've always wanted to ride a cute boy, Toga said giddily as she locked her legs around Naruto's neck, squeezing tightly as she wiggled into a comfortable spot. Oh yeah, we're gonna be super besties. Okay, seriously, why are we fighting? Are you planning to kill me? Rape me? Rape and kill me? I honestly can't tell. Naruto said as he glanced up at the odd girl, barely even affected by her attempted stranglehold thanks to chakra boosting his neck while thinking of a way around their current stalemate. He is way too calm about this. Yu thought from the sidelines as she stood in front of Rei protectively, the white tee being one of the 2 reasons she hadn't charged in to help her fellow blonde. The other was the fact that aside from looking a bit annoyed and embarrassed, Naruto seemed utterly unfazed by this random girl running up out of nowhere and trying to stab him. Haha, somebody's got some naughty thoughts, but that's not what I want at all, Toga said in a teasing tone while leaning in close to the whiskered blonde's bleeding cheek and dragging her tongue across it with a shivering moan. Now this is what I want. Such a wonderful taste. I need to have more of this beautiful blood. Great, so you're one of those types, Naruto muttered in the driest tone possible, his expression shifting to a solid deadpan as the blushing blonde kept licking his cut before sighing in tired aggravation. Oh fuck this. With thump and a swift move that caught Toga by surprise, her captive almost effortlessly wrenched her off his shoulders and slammed her into the ground, knocking the wind out of her and scraping up the side of her face on the rough asphalt. Then, while kneeling on her gut to keep her down, Naruto bit into his thumb hard enough to cause it to start bleeding and popped it into the dazed girl's mouth, making her blink in surprise. She wasn't the only one either, as both Ray and Yu stared with dumbfounded looks at the whiskered blonde's actions. After a few seconds though, Toga's blush rapidly darkened as her lips curled upwards into a large and no small bit creepy smile as she started suckling, not even caring as Naruto wrapped her up in ninja wire. "I am so done with today," he muttered once he was done before stomping off towards home, literally dragging the tied up girl along with his thumb as a still stunned Ray and Yu followed after them. Present. And that's what happened. Naruto finished his tale with a sigh, idly patting and now napping Toga's head as she kept affectionately snuggling with his side. "So that girl tried to stab you repeatedly, and instead of taking her to the police after beating her you brought her into my home?" Rumi asked incredulously, her brow started to twitch rapidly as she spoke. "Yep. Why? Aside from all the rest of the bullshit that's happened so far today?" Naruto asked back, getting a pair of nods from the rabbit woman and Nemuri. "She's an addict, I've seen enough in the red light district back home to see the signs. She didn't attack me for fun, but in desperation to get her next fix, I'm guessing it has something to do with her twerk thing." "It's quirk, but yeah, it's possible," Nemuri said while glancing at Toga's sleeping form. Since the rise of quirks, many people have had to struggle with strange addictions as a side effect of their own powers. A good example would be one of her own sidekicks with a fire-breathing quirk who had the near-constant urge to drink flammable liquids like lighter fluid. "Wouldn't be the first one I've dealt with," Rumi added with a nod, thinking back to the dozen or so villains she'd beaten who'd just been victims of their own quirks. Even so, that doesn't change the fact she needs to be turned in. If this is a case of quirk-induced insanity, then she'll be taken to rehab or a psyche ward. "Yeah, because those have proven to be so reliable," the whiskered blonde retorted while jabbing a thumb at Ray, making both heroines wince slightly. "Well said." White Tea scratched her cheek sheepishly. Meanwhile, with his point made and story finished, Naruto gently pushed Toga off and stood up, stretching his arms out wide as his joints popped. "Look, it's been a really long day and I'm tired as hell. Why don't we call it a night and finish talking about this in the morning?" "Okay. Great. Night." Not even pretending to wait for a response, he walked out of the room towards the bedrooms before popping back in for a second and pointing at Toga. "She had better still be there in the morning, or I'm kicking all your asses, well, except for you, Ray." With his absence followed a long awkward silence fell over the three heroines, former mental patient and still sleeping blood addict. "God, can this day get any weird whamma? Seems Nemuri hadn't learned her lesson yet." End chapter. Chapter 5. Last time. Not even pretending to wait for a response, he walked out of the room towards the bedrooms before popping back in for a second and pointing at Toga. "She had better still be there in the morning, or I'm kicking all your asses, well, except for you, Ray." With his absence followed a long awkward silence fell over the three heroines, former mental patient and still sleeping blood addict. "God, can this day get any weird whamma? Seems Nemuri hadn't learned her lesson yet." And now. If there was one word to describe how Toga felt when she woke up today, it would be weird. Not weird in a bad sort of way, but definitely not a good way either. It was just straight up weird and she didn't know why. Maybe it was the fact she woke up to find herself laying on a nice cozy couch inside an equally cozy yet unfamiliar apartment while firmly tied up with not so cozy metallic wire. Certainly not one of the best situations to wake up in for sure, but a quick trip through memory lane was enough to alleviate any worry or panic the blonde teen might have felt, yet the weird feeling remained. The next oddity to get her attention was the chilly and slightly ticklish sensation on her chest, right below her neck and just above her breasts. Curious, Toga craned her neck as much as she could to find that the top of her shirt had been opened just enough to expose her collarbone. And sitting in the dead center of it was a tribal-looking spiral tattoo about the size of a yen coin. Interesting, and just a wee bit concerning, yet something told the girl that that still wasn't the source for her feeling of weirdness. Must be nothing then. Toga thought dismissively as she sat up, which wasn't the easiest task given her current predicament, but she managed. Oh, you're awake, good morning." In doing so though, the bun-haired blonde ended up being spotted by the only other person in the room at the moment, Ray. The white tea was over in the kitchenette, setting up a rice cooker as she smiled nervously at the bound teen. "I hope I didn't disturb you or anything, I was just making some breakfast." "Don't worry about it, I didn't even notice you until just now honestly," Toga said casually with a shrug before licking her lips as her stomach grumbled. Speaking of breakfast though, mind making me some as well while you're at it?" "I do it myself, but as you can see my hands are a bit tied up at the moment." Sure, how do you like your rice?" Ray asked as she calmed down just a tiny bit while moving over to the cupboard to get some more ingredients. Sweet with lime slices, the tied-up blonde said politely, smiling brightly as her mouth started to water a bit. Oh, and a glass of milk please. Well, at least you've got manners, another female voice stated, making Toga snap her gaze towards the hallway to see Naruto and Mirko standing side by side, both dressed in plain loose sweatshirts and Sweetpants' pajamas. Seeing that she had the girl's attention, the rabbit heroine waved lazily as she walked over to the fridge and helped herself to some celery. Morning Miss Stab Happy, sleep well did we? In fact I did, thanks for asking Bunny-chan, Toga said happily while either missing or ignoring the dry look she got from the white tea, as she immediately focused back on Naruto with a bright-fanged smile when he sat down next to her, all but flopping against his side as she snuggled up to him. And good morning to you bestie. Morning, the whiskered boy muttered, an unsure and confused expression on his face at his fellow blonde's affectionate actions. You know, shouldn't be a bit more upset at me or something with the whole beating and tying you up thing. Probably, but you also gave me a lot of tasty blood and been super nice, so we're cool, Toga said as she continued to cuddle, before yelping when she ended up tipping over and falling onto Naruto's lap. Though if it's not too much to ask, could you please untie me already? It'd be nice to be able to move my arms again, and this stuff is really starting to dig in. Only if you promise not to try and stab me or anyone else, Naruto stated, ignoring the looks of shocked disbelief he got from Ray and Rumi. If you want more blood just ask me for some, it would be a lot less of a hassle, and I got plenty to spare. Naruto, you cannot be. Okie dokie, I promise. Toga cut Rumi off excitedly, her cheeks darkening and a bit of drool oozing from her lips at the thought of getting blood whenever she wanted, before redoubling her snuggling. You really are the bestiest best friend Naru-chan. Yeah, just calm down and hold still a sec, the whiskered blonde said as he quickly pulled the girl off of him and started fiddling with the wires, barely fighting down a blush from having an admittedly pretty girl brushing herself way too close to certain places. And there, all done. With a light snapping sound, the blushing blonde's bindings went slack and fell to the ground, allowing her to stretch her arms out with a relieved sigh as her joints popped loudly. Ah sweet freedom, how I miss thee. You are now officially insane to me, you know that right? Rumi asked Naruto rhetorically as they both watched Toga hop to her feet and start stretching more thoroughly, showing off her impressive flexibility in the process. Relax Rumi, do you really think I'd just let somebody who tried to stab me repeatedly loose without a few precautions? Naruto asked back before tapping his collarbone. I put that seal on her for a reason, she tries anything and she'll be down faster than you can say told you so. Ah, so it isn't a tattoo? Toga asked while glancing at the marking on her chest, having heard everything Naruto just said, before pouting in disappointment. Aw man, and here I was thinking my bestie got me a super cool tramp stamp as a sign of our friendship. Okay first off, that's the entirely wrong place for a tramp stamp, Rumi pointed out dully with an exasperated expression. And secondly, that's the part you're upset about. Seriously? When she got no other response aside from a non-committal shrug, the rabbit woman palmed her face as she walked back towards her room in frustration. Barely a minute later she re-emerged in her regular street clothes and headed straight for the front door. I'm out, you two have fun being crazy, I'm going to work before any more of my brain cells die from sheer stupidity. Bye Bunny-chan. Toga called out playfully right as the door slammed shut. Is now a bad time to mention that breakfast is done? Ray asked quietly, breaking the awkward silence that had formed while nervously setting said breakfast down on the coffee table, her eyes constantly flickering towards Toga as she hid slightly behind Naruto. Oh, sweet. Apparently oblivious to the older woman's blatant nervousness, Toga was quick to scoop up her plate and dug right in. Thanks for the food. Naruto on the other hand was quick to pick up on the white tea's distress, mostly because he was the one she was clinging to like a scared cat on the ceiling. Relax Ray-chan, you're more wound up than a toddler on coffee. He said while rubbing Ray's back soothingly. Well pardon me if I'm not exactly comfortable about being around the person who tried to stab you with a smile on her face, she muttered nervously as she curled behind him just a bit further. Are you sure that seal thing you were talking about works? 100%, I even tested it on a clone just to be safe, Naruto stated confidently, getting Ray to visible relax and stand up a bit straighter. And besides, even if she tried something, she'd have to get through me first to Bayo. Alright then, if you say so. This seemed to finally mollify the white tea, mostly at least, as she remembered how easily he'd handled the bloodthirsty teen before. Great, now come on, I'm starving and that food smells delicious. The whiskered blonde said while retaking his seat on the couch with the ice user in tow. Getting their own meals, the pair ate at their own pace, i.e. Naruto slurping it down quickly, while Ray was sedated and sophisticated with each mouthful. Silence once more settled over the room as the three enjoyed their meals, only broken by the clicking of utensils and eventually the droning of the TV when Naruto noticed the remote next to him. "So are you two a thing?" BFFFFFFFFT. GLRK. At least, that was the case until Toga suddenly asked that question out of the blue, causing both Ray and Naruto to spit take and choke on their food respectively. And no, why does everyone keep asking that? Naruto rasped out as he struggled to catch his breath after dislodging the rice clogging his throat. "Well, let's see, you're living together, she's constantly clinging to your side, you keep whispering things in her ear that make her happy, you keep rubbing her back to make her feel better," Toga listed off with a growing teasing smirk, whilst the otherworldly teen and ice user quickly turned bright red. "Oh, and let's not forget you've been snuggling together for the last 15 minutes. At that, the aforementioned pair's eyes widened as they turned towards each other, as they finally realized that they were in fact literally shoulder to shoulder, with their now bright red faces barely a few inches apart. "Sorry." "Yep." In almost perfect sync, Naruto and Ray sprang apart, the whiskered blonde tripping on the coffee table and falling onto his ass on the floor, whilst the white tee bolted to the other side of the room with an embarrassed shriek. "Huh, so would that be a no?" Toga asked Naruto innocently as she watched her fellow blonde pick himself up off the floor, giggling at the annoyed glare he shot her while nursing a tiny gash on his forehead before turning away when the phone started ringing. "Ooh oh, he got bloody, bonus." Just the sight of that gorgeous red liquid dribbling down the side of his forehead was enough to make her feel nothing. "Well, what's going on?" Toga wondered to herself as she kept watching the whiskered blonde, confusion flooding through her entire body at the complete and utter lack of reaction she was feeling. Just the sight of blood in general had always been enough to get her feeling a little hot under the collar and her mouth watering, but it was always on a whole other level when it was someone she was friends with. And then there was Naruto, whose blood tasted practically so divine her mouth watered at the mere thought of it and given her way more than almost every other friend she'd had combined with more to spare. So why? Why wasn't she feeling that same driving desire she'd always felt? Why was her body not warming up with that euphoric fire of desire? Why couldn't she feel her heart starting to race and flutter like it always did? Why were her thoughts not growing hazy with those delightful delicious visions of blood, and more blood? To be fair, she did feel a bit excited and she couldn't help but lick her lips as Naruto wiped the blood away to reveal unmarred skin as he answered the phone. Yet it felt so much weaker muted maybe, it was like comparing the difference between a pebble to a boulder, both were technically the same thing yet completely different. So caught up in her thoughts, Toga became so oblivious to the world around her that she never noticed Naruto standing right in front of her until he flicked her right in the middle of her forehead. "Uchi. Would you do that, Mimi?" "I was checking if anyone was still home," the whiskered blonde said jokingly while playfully tapping the top of her head until she swatted his hand away before his expression suddenly turned serious. "But seriously, you've been totally zoned out for the last 5 minutes. Something wrong, Toga?" "No, yes, maybe, I don't think so," Toga muttered unsurely as she rubbed her head, her normal cheery demeanor replaced with confused uncertainty. Eventually though, she settled for the best way she could think of at the moment to describe it. "I feel weird." "Ooh, okay, weird how?" Naruto asked with a raised brow, only for Toga to shrug. "I don't know, just really weird." "Can you be any more specific than that?" "Nope." "You're doing this intentionally to annoy me, aren't you?" "A little bit." "Alright, I give up," the whiskered blonde sighed tiredly while throwing his arms in the air before grabbing his fellow blonde's arm and pulling her to her feet. "Come on, we both need to get ready." "Ready?" Toga parroted with a tilted head. "Ready for what?" "Checkups, that call was Nemuri-chan, she's apparently set us both up with doctor appointments and is on her way to take us there," Naruto said, making his fellow blonde blink in surprise. "Yeah, surprised me too. Now come on, Rumi left some clean clothes out for you and you really need a bath." "Hey. Are you saying I stink?" Toga demanded with an offended huff. "Yes I am, because you do." "How dare you, I do not sniff, oh god I freaking reek." Toga started to deny as she took a quick whiff of her shoulder, only to end up gagging with a green face as the musk of sweat, stale blood, and God only knows what else suddenly flooded her nostrils. "Told you so," Naruto said dryly before both blondes vanished into Rumi's room, leaving Ray all by her lonesome in the living room. Still blushing heavily, the white tee took several long slow breaths as she slowly managed to regain her composure after quite possible one of the most embarrassing moments in her life. "Alright, the bathroom's over there and there are the clothes that why the hell are you undressing?" "Well duh, I can't take a bath in my clothes silly." "That's not what I meant." "I know." Scratch that, now it was the most embarrassing moment of her life. Half an hour later. "Ha ha ha ha. You seriously did that?" "Yep." Naruto's brow twitched rapidly in annoyance as he and Toga sat in the back seat of a sleek black car that was driven by Nemuri, his face bright red and steam rising from the top of his head as the vampiric-like blonde beside him finished telling the laughing R-rated heroine about the morning events. "You should have seen it," he was like, "what are you doing? And cover up already?" Well, he was totally enjoying the view, Toga said with a teasing giggle while resting her head on her fellow blonde's shoulder. "Isn't that right, Naru-chan? I swear, I am going to get you back for that Tobeo." Naruto grumbled sourly as he somehow did the impossible and blushed even harder, which made the two women laugh even harder. Man, that has to be one of the funniest things I've ever heard," Nemuri said after a few moments once she managed to get her laughter under control. "Shame I missed all the fun though." "Well, there's always next time, right?" the bloodthirsty blonde suggested with a mischievous smirk that the sultry heroine shared. "I like the way you think, young lady." "Welp, I'm doomed," Naruto thought in despair, already able to see the diabolical plots forming in the teasing duo's heads. Fearing for his sanity, the whiskered blonde was quick to think up of anything to change the subject. "So, what exactly is this whole checkup thing really about? I doubt it's as simple as you made it sound over the phone." "HMPH, feeling a bit paranoid, are we?" Nemuri asked rhetorically as she glanced at the boy through her rearview mirror. "You should relax, kid, we're just following standard procedure. Making sure you're healthy, up to date on your vaccinations, and don't have any unwelcome surprises that could cause some trouble later." "Alright, and what about her?" Naruto asked while jabbing a thumb towards Toga. "Full psych evaluation and quirk examination," the perplet stated, making the whiskered teen nod in understanding, yet getting the blushing blonde beside him to perk up in interest. "So I'm gonna have some docs try poking around in my head, huh? That's gonna be fun," she said, her voice an odd mixture of her normal chipperness and sarcasm. "And I'm guessing I don't get a say in this, do I?" "Oh, you have a choice, Toga Himiko," the heroine said with a shake of her head as she fixed a bubbly blonde with a menacing stare that froze her in place. "You can either take the evaluation to see if your bestest bestie is right and you get professional help, or you can refuse and I can finally throw you into a nice little jail cell for multiple counts of assault, 4 murders, and 13 attempted murders." "Ah well, when you put it like that, I guess the choice is obvious." Toga muttered as she gulped nervously and her face paled, all traces of humor vanishing as the reality of the situation she was in finally came crashing down on her. "That's it is," Nemuri agreed, her expression relaxing as she turned her attention back to the road. "Besides, we also got to make sure you didn't catch anything icky bugs during your misadventures, or if you gave any to Naruto for that matter." "What?" both blondes asked in sync, question marks seemingly blinking above their heads. "You'll see," was all the perplet said before the car came to a sudden stop. "Would you look at that, we're here." Popping her door open, Nemuri was already out of the car before either of the blondes even realized what was happening, leaving them to quickly scramble out after her. Once they were though, both teens paused as they found themselves in a private parking lot just outside a huge mostly glass building that was shaped like an H. "Sheesh, talk about shiny," Naruto said, shading his eyes a bit as the sunlight reflected off the building towards them. "Whoever owns this place must spend a fortune on glass cleaner." "No kidding," Toga agreed, both nervousness and excitement in her voice as she quickly took in everything she could. "Are we where I think we are?" "Yep, welcome to UA, the most renowned hero school of all Japan," Nemuri said as she gestured to the large building proudly before marching off towards a much smaller building in the opposite direction. "Now come on you two, we have an appointment to keep and trust me when I say you do not want to be late for it." Yeah, I know, if the doctor here is anything like Bachan." Naruto couldn't even finish his sentence as a shiver ran down and he hurried along after the perplet, Toga skipping along beside him. If there was one thing that Tsunade definitely pounded into his head over time, it was you do not get on the bad side of the people who were gonna be sticking you with needles. It did not end well at all. Meanwhile, beep beep beep. The familiar one-eyed girl could be found laying on a hospital bed, sleeping peacefully with one side of her face mostly covered in bandages and an IV attached to her arm. She wasn't alone either, as sitting next to her bed was a large burly man with salt and pepper hair, his face starting to wrinkle with age, and a single long scar stretching across his face from the bridge of his nose to his right cheek. Yet despite his imposing appearance, the man looked anything but threatening as he hunched over the bed, his expression a mixture of disbelief and pure relief as he gently clasped the sleeping teen's hand. And lastly, standing by the door was Izawa, looking scruffy and tired as he always did while he sipped at a juice packet, and Namasa, a manila folder in the detective's hand that had Tamao Guro written on the tab. I almost can't believe it," the burly man muttered, tears falling from his eyes as he bowed his head after all these years, so many dead ends and wild goose chases, and I only have my baby girl back because they left you for dead. I'm so sorry Tamao, I'm so sorry. It's all my fault. If only I'd listened to you, none of this would have happened. We have our best tracking heroes and officers scouring the park she was found at, Naruhina said, tucking the file away into his coat while patting the crying man's shoulder supportingly. If there's anything there that can tell us what happened, we'll find it. Iwow, I promise. Not getting any response from the now named Iwow as he kept apologizing over and over to his daughter's sleeping form, the detective sighed before heading back out the door with Aizawa following after him. You are getting too emotionally invested, Naruhina, the scruffy man said once the door clicked shut behind them. You shouldn't make promises you know you can't keep. This case has already hit a dead end. It's only been a day, Aizawa, something could still turn up, Naruhina retorted as he turned towards the underground hero with a raised brow. Aren't you the one who's going on about being logical? Because it sounds like you're being pretty presumptuous to me. I am being logical, Aizawa stated dryly, staring the detective dead in the eye. And logically speaking, the only evidence we have right now is a girl who's been missing for 5 years, wasp venom in her bloodstream, a pile of dead wasps 2 blocks away that look like they've been through a blender, and a single eyewitness who's most likely lying about how he found her. Oh, what makes you so say that? The detective asked, his brow rising slightly higher. Because, I highly doubt someone put in the effort to keep a girl looking like she's still 15 for nearly 5 years just to stab her eye out and ditch her in some random park where anyone could find her. The tired hero said, getting Naruhina to frown but nod reluctantly in agreement. Fair point, but what of the girl herself? Once she wakes up, her testimony could prove invaluable to discovering what happened. The living lie detector pointed out. After years in captivity and suffering severe head trauma recently, Aizawa asked dull, getting Naruhina to grimace while he pulled out a fresh juice pouch from somewhere and started to walk away. Yeah, excuse me if I don't hold my breath in anticipation. End chapter. Chapter 6. Last time. If there was one thing that Tsunade definitely pounded into his head over time, it was you do not get on the bad side of the people who were gonna be sticking you with needles. It did not end well at all. After years in captivity and suffering severe head trauma recently, Aizawa asked dull, getting Naruhina to grimace while he pulled out a fresh juice pouch from somewhere and started to walk away. Yeah, excuse me if I don't hold my breath in anticipation. And now, half an hour later. Within a modest little doctor's office, Naruto and Toga could be found sitting on plain metal stools, both looking more than a little bit bored as the former balanced a tower of kunai on his finger and the latter kicked her legs around. Meanwhile, off to the side, Nemuri was idly flipping through a magazine about various hero conspiracies, giggling occasionally as she found particularly funny or ridiculous articles, like how some people were so certain Endeavor covered his face in flames was to hide bald spots. "So is this doc gonna show up sometime today or what?" Naruto asked as he carefully added another kunai to the stack, bringing the total up to 5. Relax, recovery girl will get here when she gets here, the perplet said with a dismissive wave while she set the magazine down and got a new one. She's probably just stuck helping some poor schmuck from the hero course who hurt themselves again, happens at least thrice a week. Now be a good patient and be patient. But I'm so bored, the whiskered blonde groaned out, sending the stack of ninja knives flying up with a flick of his hand before effortlessly catching them one by one on his fingers as they fell, getting a small round of applause from Toga. You can't honestly expect us to. Hey. Get back here, young lady. I told you not to. Bang. Naruto was cut off mid-complaint when the sound of someone yelling echoed in through the walls, right before the door burst open to reveal a very excited-looking teen girl. The first things that stuck out about her were the tight and scuffed-up blue gym uniform she wore, her long shin-length periwinkle hair, and the peppering of painful-looking welts all over her arms and face. Oh. You two must be the visitors recovery girl was talking about. The girl exclaimed excitedly, zipping across the room so she was right in front of Naruto and Toga. Are you two related? Are you gonna be students here? What are your quirks? Why are you blushing? Are those whiskers part of your quirk or tattoos? Can I pet them? Are those real fangs? You gotta be kitty people, right? With each question she asked, the unknown bubbly teen hopped from one to the other and back again, not even waiting for an answer from one before asking the other something else, her eyes practically sparkling with excitement the whole time. Not that either Naruto or Toga could answer anyway, both blondes too baffled and stunned by the girl's abrupt arrival to even respond. Do you purr? Is your hair just hair or actually fur? Do you always land on your face, Makoe? So caught up in her questioning though, the brunette was utterly oblivious as an annoyed-looking and short elderly lady dressed in strange nurse outfit walking up behind her until she got whacked upside the head by a cane styled like a large syringe. Hijire Hado, what did I literally just get finished telling you? Chiyoshu Senji, otherwise known as the youthful heroine. Recovery girl, asked in a dull tone as she fixed the now named Hijire with a firm gaze. Don't go bother your new patients. The brunette said with her head bowed as she rubbed the back of it, both in sheepishness and from the pain of getting smacked. "And what did you do?" "Went and bothered your new patients," she admitted in a regretful tone before doing a complete 180 in mood and started bouncing in place excitedly. "I just couldn't help myself though, I love meeting new people. And these guys have to be interesting if you're giving them personal checkups." Continuing to stare at the energetic girl sternly for several more moments, recovery girl eventually just rolled her eyes with an exasperated and amused sigh before pointing to an empty seat next to Nemuri. "I figured as much, just sit down and at least try to stay put while I do my work then." "Okie dokie," Najire said, saluting jokingly while flopping into a seat, albeit one right next to Naruto, rather than the one Chio had pointed to, and started lightly poking the blonde's whisker marks furiously to his chagrin. "I should have seen that coming," Chio thought with a bemused giggle before turning towards the still open doorway. "Come on you two, might as well introduce yourselves now." A moment after she said that, two young men popped into view, a muscular blonde teen with odd scleroless eyes and bashful grin, and a thin dark blue-haired guy with elven-like ears and nervous demeanor, who kept staring at a nearby wall. Both teens wore identical gym clothes and were covered all over in angry red welts just like Najire. "Sorry recovery girl, we tried to stop her, but you know how Najire gets with new stuff," the former said apologetically, scratching the back of his head awkwardly as he stepped into the room. Once he was closer though, the muscular boy's attitude quickly brightened up as he held out one of his hands to each of his fellow blondes. "It's nice to meet you, I'm Mirio, and the shy guy behind me is Tamaki, sorry about our friend barging in like this." Hello," Tamaki muttered softly, still refusing to make eye contact. "Hey, it's fine, better than just sitting here bored out of my mind anyway," Naruto said, swatting Najire's hand away repeatedly as she kept trying to mess with his whiskers while shaking Mirio's. "Naruto Uzumaki at your service." "And I'm Toga," Toga said cheerily while accepting the other hand. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Muscles." "Oh. Nice one, I'm totally gonna start calling you that from now on," Najire told Mirio, sending Toga a thumbs up whilst her friend rolled his eyes. "If that's what you want, Blueberry Blast," he retorted jokingly, getting the brunette to burst out in giggles. "Alright, now that you've been introduced, why don't you two take a seat so I can do my job already?" Recovery girl said, an edge of impatience leaking into her voice as she pointedly tapped her cane on the ground. In an instant, both young men were seated next to Midnight with nervous smiles. Chio may be the nicest of nicest doctors you ever met most of the time, but anyone that had ever gotten on her bad side learned exactly how scary a cane could be. "Better," the elderly woman said with a nod before pulling out a remote from one of her many pockets as she walked up to Toga. "Well dearie, ladies first." Beep, thunk thunk. "The fuck?" Naruto yelped in surprise, jumping up into a ready fighting position as a pair of walls suddenly shot up from the floor, completely cutting Toga and recovery girl out of view. "Relax will you, they're just privacy walls," Nemuri said, a light snicker slipping past her lips at seeing the whiskered blonde's reaction. Meanwhile, Tamaki chuckled almost inaudibly whilst Mirio chuckled and Najire patted Naruto's back as he settled back into his seat. "They get everyone the first time." "Gee, thanks for the heads up," Naruto said sarcastically, sending the perplexed an annoyed glare that only made her giggle even more. "And hasn't anyone ever heard of, oh I don't know, curtains? We used to use those, sure," the adult-rated heroine stated while pushing up on the bridge of her glasses, smirking as the light reflected off her lenses dramatically. "But then we had to deal with rampant cases of privacy violation and peeping, thanks to people with super hearing, super vision, X-ray vision, or invisibility quirks, and quirks with dangerous backlash like emitting radiation or poisonous gas while sleeping." "Yeah, that makes sense," the whiskered blonde said after a brief pause, unable to argue with that logic, before reflexively swatting Najire's hand away when she started petting his cheek. "What the heck are you doing?" "You're a kitty guy, I wanna see if you purr when I pet your whiskers," the brunette admitted without even an ounce of shame as she immediately went for another attempt, much to Naruto's displeasure. "Boy. I am not a cat to bayo. And I definitely do not. BRRRRRRRMMM. Pure silence filled the room as everyone stared at the otherworldly teen, who in turn was looking down at his own chest with a surprised expression. What do you know, I actually purr," he said after a few moments, sounding both fascinated and confused before freezing as a chilling impending sense of doom ran down his back. Slowly looking back up, sweat almost immediately began pouring from his brow upon seeing both Najire and Nemuri's faces literally inches from his own, the former's eyes sparkling like a kid in a candy store and the latter grinning all too similarly to a certain purple and pink cat from Wonderland. "So cute. Here, kitty kitty." As the pair loomed over him, it took exactly .001 seconds for Naruto to figure out exactly what was about to happen and turn paler than a sun-bleached bone soaked in bleach. "Oh shit, I actually purr." Meanwhile, a few moments earlier. "Ooh, that was so cool." Toga exclaimed excitedly as she watched the wall spring up and lock into place. Do it again. Do it again. Perhaps later dear, Chio said with an amused shake of her head before patting the chair's armrest, prompting the blushing blonde to settle down and lean back in her seat. Before we start, I am obligated to inform you that due to your unique circumstances, you are and will be under observation for this whole exam. Yeah, Toga looked up at the ceiling pointedly, where a pair of newly installed cameras, if the small bits of plaster and fresh paint smell meant anything, were trained in on her, and then towards the wall behind her, which hid an innocently placed mirror. I kinda figured as much. She was a known and wanted criminal in the middle of a school for heroes, so of course they'd have some kind of surveillance setup. In all honesty, she was more surprised that she hadn't been strapped in place or at least had her hands cuffed. As long as you understand, could you please hold out your dominant arm? The healing heroine asked while reaching into another pocket, this time pulling out a few alcohol wipes and what looked like a strange and fancy watch. You got it, the cheery teen said, holding up her right arm which Chio quickly disinfected with the wipes and then wrapped the watch around. Ooh oh, nice bling, very trestle emote. Not bad, but you said very twice dear, Chio corrected as she finished tying the strap before twisting the top of the device. Now relax and take a deep breath, this part tends to sting a little bit. Sting? Why click ouch. Toga winced with a hiss when the watch clamped down tightly and several tiny needles dug into her flesh, sending a small jolt of pain through her arm. However, just as quickly as it came, the discomfort faded and was replaced by a mild tingling feeling, kinda similar to when part of her body falls asleep. Frowning, the blushing blonde held the device up to eye level and glared at the screen as it blinked red a few times, then purple, before settling on solid blue. And I take back what I said about this thing, it totally sucks. What even is it anyway? It's a portable bioanalyzer, or a doctor in a watch, Chio explained while rolling her eyes as Toga continued to glower at the watch-like gadget. It's set to be standard issue for all doctor exams within the next year or so. I don't think they're gonna be very popular. The literal bloodthirsty teen said dryly, shaking her hand to try and get rid of that annoying tingle in her fingers. Perhaps dearie, but neither is visiting a doctor in the first place. Touché. However, I'm a bit old-fashioned so, the elderly woman started while pulling out a tongue depressor and flashlight. Open wide and say ah. Eh ah. Meanwhile, as the girl had her throat examined, 3 people watched on in interest from the other side of the mirror. Everything appears to be in working order, the first individual, a short humanoid creature with white fur and a large scar over one eye said cheerily, his gaze drifting from Toga and recovery girl to a laptop set before him, showing the PPA readouts. The eccentric, helpful and terrifyingly smart principal of UA, Nezu the dog bear mouse thing. And my oh my, such an interesting little wealth of information. Don't you agree Tomoko-san? No kidding, her endorphins and dopamine levels are alarmingly high and just look at her brain activity and metabolic rate, they're all over the place. The now named Tomoko, a woman with long emerald hair and wearing a cat-themed costume, said as she traced her finger over a few different areas. Sounds intriguing woof, the last person, Kenji Tsuragami, a police chief with the head of a dog in place of a normal human once stated. Though if you excuse me if I have no idea what any of that means exactly, mind enlightening me. It means that Uzumaki lad was quite accurate about this poor girl having a severe addiction, just not how severe exactly, Nezu said as he turned his attention back to Toga, who was now demonstrating her quirk by transforming into Naruto, albeit still wearing her clothing instead of his. It appears that Himiko-san's quirk not only affects her nucleus accumbens and lateral hypothalamus to stimulate her desire for blood, but has a direct connection to her digestive system that results in a false nutritional requirement. Translation please. The chief asked dryly as he turned to Ragdoll. Basically she's felt like she was starving and going through withdrawal at the same time, said Emeraldette simplified as she sent the blushing blonde a sympathetic look which only grew when she used her quirk. Search on the teen. All the time, likely for most if not all her life. Ah woof, that can't have been pleasant, Kenji muttered, grimacing as he imagined such an experience, though that didn't stop him from politely averting his gaze when Toga had to lift her shirt so Chio could use a stethoscope. If that's true then it's no wonder she snapped. And would also explain why she has been so mentally stable since meeting Uzumaki-san, he was probably the first that ever gave her a full meal as it were, Nezu added, while sipping at a cup of tea he got from somewhere. Although this also brings up some very concerning questions. You thinking another case of Aiki? The dog-headed man asked. Aiki, otherwise known as intentional quirk ignorance, was when a parent or parents would ignore, shun, and/or attempt to suppress their child's quirk, whether it be because the child had one that was considered useless, villainous, or even just personal bias. It was a horrible act of neglect that was sadly growing more and more common each year, with a current estimate of 1 out of every 7 villains being directly resulted from such childhoods. I'm almost certain of it, the principal stated, taking another sip as he watched Chio finishing up her exam after cleaning up the gray sludgy mess left behind by Toga's quirk. According to Himiko-san's file, her parents have changed their statements multiple times, going from claiming she was an innocent angel that wouldn't harm a fly to a relentless demon child that was born bad. Yet there is not a single trip to a quirk or regular therapist on her record, odd no. I'll have some officers look into it further woof, Kenji said calmly as he jotted something down on a notepad, though if one listened closely, they could just hear a low grumbling growl. However, as he was writing, a loud pinging prompted the man to pull his phone from his pocket and groan. Damn it, something is up back at the station with the construction crew, I got to go. Let me know if anything else turns up. Ah yes, of course, you'll be the first to know if we turn anything up, Saragami-san. Nezu said with a wave as the police chief hurried out of the darkened room, just a small amount of annoyance and bemused bleeding into his voice. You knew that was gonna happen, didn't you? Ragdoll asked once Kenji was gone. He's the chief of police, Tomoko-san, it's expected that something would come up that would need his immediate attention sooner rather than later. It is why I much prefer working with Namasa-san, less untimely interruptions. The odd principal admitted casually while sipping his tea once more, getting an understanding nod from the cat-themed heroine. Back with Toga. Just a little twist here in Viola, recovery girl said as she removed the PPA from Toga's arm and her lips stretched out to plant a kiss on the girl's forehead, causing the small punctures left behind to rapidly heal away into nothing. All done, that wasn't so bad, was it? I guess so, the blushing blonde mumbled with a shrug, rolling her recently healed wrist with a satisfying crack, before suddenly perking up excitedly as a thought hit her. Oh, do I get a lollipop now? Unable to help herself, Chio giggled at the sight of a teen girl bouncing in her seat excitedly like a little kid and pulled out a handful of gummy bears. Unfortunately no, but how about some of these little guys instead? Ooh, oh, I love gummy bears. Faster than the elderly healer could blink, the sweets were swiped from her grasp and quickly started vanishing into the bloodthirsty teen's mouth. Thank you. Now, no talking with your mouth full, dearie. Recovery girl chided half-heartedly as she activated the device that retracted the privacy walls. Thunk thunk brrrrrrrmm. Stop it. Smack stop it. Smack stop it. Smack. Only for both her and Toga to end up blinking in surprise upon being greeted by the sight of a dull-faced and lightly blushing Naruto as he alternated swatting Najira and Midnight's hands away from his cheeks. Oh my gosh. You can purr. Toga exclaimed, her eyes sparkling as she all but teleported to her fellow blonde side. That is so adorable. Why didn't you tell me you can purr? Trust me, this is as much a surprise for me as it is you, Naruto said dryly, his brow twitching as the bloodthirsty teen joined the other two women and started playfully scratching his whiskers. This is gonna be a thing from now on, isn't it? Every time we meet from now on. Midnight admitted shamelessly with a teasing grin, even as she finally stopped and retook her seat, though mostly to get out of Chio's way. Alright you two, enough tormenting the poor boy and go take a seat, the elderly healer said as she gently pushed both Toga and Najira away from the whiskered blonde whose face they were shamelessly molesting. I have a job to do still, so shoo. Oh, but I barely got to pet him. Toga grumbled with a cute pout and slumped shoulders as she reluctantly backed off, flopping into an empty seat beside Mirio. And I still have questions that need answered, Najira said while sinking back into her own chair, which she promptly scooched even closer to Naruto's. Like, why are you getting an exam from recovery girl? Wouldn't a regular doctor have been fine? Are you gonna be students? Is your hair naturally blonde? Do you have fangs too? Where Chio suddenly drops a bag of gummy bears onto the brunette's lap. Oh, candy. She really is airheaded. Most of the room's occupants thought in sync as they watched the brunette helped herself to the chewy sweets. Click ow. Meanwhile, Naruto grunted as the elderly nurse used the opportunity to attach a fresh PBA onto him, earning herself a dirty look from the whiskered blonde. Gee, thanks for the heads up, doc. Oh, don't be such a wuss, it wasn't that bad, dearie, recovery girl said as she patted the boy's shoulder. And besides, I'd be more worried on what exactly that little gadget might find if I were you. Excuse me? The blonde asked with a raised brow, his eyes flickering from the healing heroine and the device on his arm. Well dearie, who knows what you may have caught whilst you were giving Himiko-san blood, Chio stated, getting said blushing teen's attention, especially when elderly lady added. She does have syphilis after all. I what? Toga exclaimed in shock, her face rapidly paling. How is tea that? The PBA detected it when I first put it on, speaking of which you're clean dear, recovery girl explained while checking the screen to find it set on solid green, before turning back to see the still shocked look on Toga's face. What? Did you think carelessly consuming blood from random strangers wouldn't have consequences, dearie? But my quirk. Having a blood-based quirk does not mean you are automatically immune to blood-borne diseases, just like how most with fire quirks can still get burned, the youthful heroine cut Toga off with a shake of her head. You should be grateful that syphilis is all you got, young lady. I already gave you a shot of penicillin which should clear that right up. It could have easily been something far worse and much harder to treat like HIV or hepatitis. Toga didn't say anything, in fact it was hard to tell if she was even listening anymore as she sank deeper into her seat, a look of dawning horror on her pale face as she idly tapped the side of her lips with one hand. Oh man, I thought we were intruding before, but this really takes the cake. Mirio thought with an awkward cough, unknowingly mirroring both Najira and Tamako's own thoughts. Reaching over, Nemuri gave the normally chronically blushing blonde a shake that didn't even get a blink in response. I think you broke her. I'm not surprised, Recovery Girl said with a sigh as this was far from her first time shattering someone's misconceptions about their quirks like that. Could one of you be a dear and take her to Inui-san? No doubt she's going to need a therapist and he's expecting her anyway. I'll do it. Tamaki muttered quietly, grabbing a still unresponsive Toga by the arm and gently pulling her along out of the room. And I'll go make sure she actually makes it once he realizes he inevitably gets too embarrassed halfway slam down the hall. Nemuri said as she followed after the pair, adding the last bit after the telltale sound of someone smacking their head into a wall rang out. Once they were gone, an awkward silence settled within the exam room as the remaining occupants were unsure how to react. Say aside from Chio who continued her exam like nothing had happened. After a minute or so though, Mirio decided to finally speak his mind as he looked towards the elderly nurse with an uncharacteristic frown on his face. That was kinda harsh. I dress wounds not the truth dearie, the healing heroine stated as she went from checking Naruto's throat to his eyes. She needed to learn that her actions have serious consequences for both her sake and the sake of those around her. Alright, if you say so. The muscular blonde said with a reluctant nod. But should you have really blurted it out like that? What about doctor-patient confidentiality? Won't you get in trouble? Najira asked rapidly, her head tilted to the side with curiosity. Of course not, I'm also legally obligated to inform my other patient of risks, such as possible infection of a dangerous disease, Recovery Girl stated, then suddenly fixing both teens with a stern look as her cane seemed to shine ominously. Besides, I know you won't go gossiping about Himiko-san's personal health information without her permission, right? Yes ma'am. Mirio and Najira said quickly in identical nervous tones, the former even going so far as to salute like a marine. Good, the elderly nurse said before turning her attention back to Naruto with her stethoscope at the ready. Now, I need you to take off your shirt for this, so do you want the walls up or? Nah, I'm good, the whiskered blonde cut in, not even hesitating on pulling, said clothing off to reveal his toned chest and waist. However, as he handed the bundled shirt over to Najira, who totally wasn't ogling his chest at all, he couldn't help but note the welts on her arm again. Hey, speaking of health stuff, what's with all those bumps? Oh, funny story actually, said Brunette started with an excited grin, whilst her blonde companion grimaced. You see, our class was doing a practice rescue operation where we weren't allowed to use our quirks and… someone definitely knows how to stay in shape, Ragdoll said with an approving nod at seeing Naruto's bare chest, a light blush on her cheeks. The whiskered teen was the perfect mix of muscles and leanness, with firm pecs and solid biceps that showed he had the bite to back up his bark, yet still keeping a thin streamlined build. It's a good thing Pixie Bob didn't come with me or she'd be all over this kid right now. Ah yes, she has been getting quite a bit desperate on finding a husband these last few years, Nezu agreed while sipping at his tea, constantly going from staring at the whiskered blonde to the laptop and back again with an interested hum. However, I don't believe admiring Uzumaki-san's physique was the reason I requested you to come. Yeah, I know, this isn't the first time you've called me for this, the Emeraldette said in faux exasperation as she playfully rolled her eyes before they gained a familiar gleam when she locked her sights onto Naruto again. Given her quirk could moderately gauge a person's strengths and weaknesses at a literal glance, the heroine had been called to help with such things, mostly by hero schools, wanting to see if she thought someone could do well in their hero courses. I mean seriously, my quirk can only tell so Suoha-aya. Tomoko-san. Is something Tomak-san? Hearing his companion abruptly trailing off mid-sentence, Nezu glanced towards the cat-dressed woman curiously, only to instantly cut himself off in an alarmed tone. Drawling on like a broken record, Ragdoll's face had paled to almost pure white and her arms hung limply at her sides. The most striking and alarming thing though were her now severely bloodshot and rapidly twitching eyes that then promptly rolled up into the back of her head, with blood flowing down her cheeks like tears as she pitched forward. And that's when we found out that weird buzzing wasn't part of the test, but actually a colony of wild honeybees thunka. Najira was just getting to the end of her little tale when everyone's attention was stolen by a sudden thumping sound as the mirror on the wall distended outwards. Huh, has that mirror always been there? Recovery girl was about to respond, likely to say it was her dissuade attention, but before even the first word could pass her lips, Naruto was in front of the glass faster than she could blink. Priya crack. But she promptly ripped out of place one-handedly, along with a large portion of the wall itself, revealing the once hidden observation room with Nezu frantically trying to help a heavily convulsing ragdoll. What the fuck? End chapter. Chapter 7. Last time. Recovery girl was about to respond, likely to say it was her dissuade attention, but before even the first word could pass her lips, Naruto was in front of the glass faster than she could blink. Priya crack. But she promptly ripped out of place one-handedly, along with a large portion of the wall itself, revealing the once hidden observation room with Nezu frantically trying to help a heavily convulsing ragdoll. What the fuck? And now. Meanwhile. Tick tick tick. Tick tick tick. Tick tee. Why do all shrinks have very loud clocks? Toga asked irritably while sending an annoyed glance at said clock, one of the few furnishings that decorated the room she was in. Speaking of which, the literally bloodthirsty teen could be found sitting on a plain but no less comfortable looking chair set in the middle of an equally plain office. You'd have to ask my boss, he was the one who insisted it be there, the only other occupant in the room, a man with a dog face and long shaggy blonde hair otherwise known as the pro-hero hound dog, said in a low growling tone mixed with the occasional stifled bark. In his hands was a thick manila envelope that he was idly flipping through, his gaze flickering from the pages within to the girl before him and back again several times. And to be clear, I'm not a shrink, just a guidance counselor with psychologist training. A tomato tomato potato potato, Toga shrugged as she plastered on a cheery smile. So is this the part where you start by asking me how I'm feeling or something? Normally yes, but judging by the fact you've spent the last 45 minutes between hyperventilating and strangling the birthday gift I just got from my niece last week, I'd say the answer to that question is pretty obvious. The dog man stated bluntly while pointing downwards, causing Toga's gaze to drift downwards to her hands, which were clasped tightly around a deformed and slightly chewed up rubber bone, with number 1 bestest uncle ever sloppily scribbled on the side. Haha, sorry about that. She muttered with a sheepish giggle, gingerly setting the ruined dog toy on the hero's desk before putting her hands behind her back with an innocent whistle. Don't worry about it, it was already doomed to such a fate eventually. Besides, as he spoke, Hound Dog set the folder in his grasp down, revealing a picture of a younger Toga, along with over a dozen police reports, health records, and other such documents. I do believe we have other matters to discuss. Oh yeah, Toga's smile became noticeable more strained, and the faux cheery air around her evaporated away into nothingness. I'll be honest, was kinda hoping we could skip this part. You would not be the first nor will you be the last, but you can only avoid the issue for so long. The UA counselor stated while steepling his fingers together so he could rest the end of his snout on them. If you say so, the petite blonde said dismissively as she leaned back into her seat and smiled casually. So what you want to talk about then, doc? Want me to say how naughty I've been and that I'm sorry for what I've done wrong? Tell me how I should be a good law-abiding little girl that does as she's told like everybody else. Or maybe. Let's just start with you, Hound Dog interjected bluntly, getting Toga to pause with a confused look as he reached down and flipped the folder shut. Tell me your story. My story? Toga repeated as her head tilted to the side in thought until the metaphoric lightbulb finally lit up in her mind. Ooh, you mean like my past and all that stuff? Correct. The dog man stated with a nod, to which he got a shrug in response from the girl. What's there to tell? You already read all about me in those fancy files of yours, haven't you? They've told me one side of the story, now I want to hear it from your side. Hound Dog retorted without pause as he made a go-on motion. Well, if you insist, Toga said before smiling brightly and holding her hands up in a dramatic manner. It all started a long time ago, in a galaxy far far away. No Star Wars parodizing. Party pooper. Zox. Ooh, my head. Ragdoll groaned softly as she came back to the conscious world, a grimace marring her lips and her face scrunching up from the dull continuous throbbing that greeted her from within her skull, especially right behind her eyes. When she tried to open them though, the Emeraldette felt a spike of confusion and worry shoot through her when she was greeted by nothing but darkness. What's going on? She muttered in confusion as she sat up slightly from what felt like a bed, reaching up to her face to find that the reason she couldn't see was thanks to several layers of bandages wrapped around the top half of her face. Well, why can't I see? Just a little precautionary treatment dearie, recovery girl's voice stated, making the cat-themed heroine jump slightly from the unexpected response before grabbing her head again as the sudden movement made her headache spike in intensity. Oh, sorry about that, didn't mean to startle you. How are you feeling? Like Ryuko dragged me out for a girls' night at the bar twice, Ragdoll muttered as the top of the bed she lay on rose up into a seated position. Ugh, what happened to me? The last thing I can remember I was about to use my quirk on Whiskers and then everything gets fuzzy. It would seem that your quirk has an unexpectedly severe adverse reaction when used on Uzumaki-san, Nezu chipped in as he sipped at a cup of tea at the edge of the Emeraldette's bed while Recovery Girl tended over her, the animal man's lips curling upward slightly in amusement at the nickname she'd given Naruto. You were out for almost an hour, most of your retinal blood vessels had ruptured, and you were just shy of a full-blown aneurysm. Thankfully you should make a full recovery within a week, however you absolutely must keep your eyes covered and avoid using your quirk if we want to keep it that way, the elderly healer heroine added in sternly while carefully readjusting the bandages. And even then, you should seriously consider seeing an ophthalmologist afterwards just to be on the safe side. The whole week. Yeesh, I must have really been messed up if even you need that long to fix it. The, hopefully, temporarily blind heroine muttered with a nervous smile, given Recovery Girl could literally heal almost any injury near instantly with just a kiss. Indeed, had Shuzenji-san not been here right when it happened, you'd likely have been mostly if not entirely blind the rest of your life, Nezu stated casually like he was talking about the weather, earning himself a light smack from Recovery Girl, while Ragdoll shivered as she fought down the urge to rub her bandaged eyes. By the way, I've taken the liberty of informing the rest of your team of what happened already, so they should be here soon to pick you up. Oh, how badly did they take it? Tsuchikawa-san kindly offered to put Uzumaki-san's eyes in a similar condition with her claws after Chitara-san introduces his foot to the boy's rear end. That sounds about right. Ragdoll muttered with a half-amused sigh, not even bothering to ask if Nezu had explained that it wasn't actually Naruto's fault, given she knew just how overprotective her friend's colleagues could be at times. Like that one time a guy Pixie Bob had been dating for about a week actually tried flirting with Mandalay right in front of her. Long story short, that man now has an utmost fear of anything even remotely feline. So can you truly not remember anything after using your quirk? Recovery Girl asked to change the subject, although there was a genuine hint of curiosity in her voice as she spoke. Instead of answering right away though, Ragdoll hummed softly to herself while rubbing her chin, her brow furrowing as she went through her recent memories with a fine-tooth comb. Normally she had no trouble doing such a thing, in fact doing so quite often to help sort out the large amounts of information her quirk could collect. Maybe, but it doesn't make any sense, she eventually said unsurely after several moments of silence, her lips curling into an uncharacteristic frown. That seizure must have messed with my head or something, because for some reason I could swear my quirk says that there was a second person in the exact same spot as Uzumaki-san. Is that so? Nezu asked curiously, his ear twitching slightly as he tilted his head to the side. Yeah, but not like a dual sentience quirk or something, it just NNNG. Ragdoll started to say, only to yelp and grab her head when her headache erupted tenfold. Easy there dearie, Recovery Girl said softly as she reclined the bed back to a laying position. We can focus more on that stuff later. For now you just work on getting some more rest and getting better, alright? That sounds like a swell idea to me, the Emeraldette said with a slow nod once the pain faded back to a dull throb. Speaking of Whiskers though, where is he? Did he leave already? Oh no, he's still around somewhere, a knowing smirk formed on Nezu's lips as he spoke, hidden just behind his teacup as an analytical gleam shined within his beady eyes. He just got a bit antsy sitting around for so long, so Toga-san and Heido-san volunteered to show him somewhere he could blow off some steam as they say. Zox. So they have an entire fake city just for training in? Naruto asked with a raised brow as he took in the training zone between stretches, his voice echoing slightly through the lifeless city and people say I go overboard. It even has completely functional electricity, plumbing, and gas lines for full authenticity. Isn't that awesome? Najire, now free of her bee stings thanks to Recovery Girl, asked back excitedly as she bounced around the whiskered blonde, her feet emitting small golden spirals of energy that gave each hop a little extra oomph. Although it's not really an entire city, only about 4 or 5 blocks worth. And you're only supposed to use it if you have a teacher's permission or an open access permit like we do. That last part was only added last year because our homeroom teacher got tired of her pestering him about it all the time, Mirio added as he did some stretches as well on the other side of the street before chuckling when his blue-haired friend rubbed the back of her head with a sheepish smile. So we doing this with or without quirks? Are you kidding? I've been itching for a good fight all week, rolling his shoulders, Naruto grinned excitedly while cracking his knuckles and neck at the same time. So unless you want another trip straight to the infirmary I'd suggest not holding back. Duly noted, the other blonde stated with a confident smirk of his own as he got into a ready pose. Najire, you mind being the ref? Not a problem. You can count on me. Najira exclaimed while bouncing out of the way, popping down onto a nearby bench with a referee hat on her head and a bucket of popcorn and large fountain drink that she got from somewhere in either hand. Ooh oh, this is so exciting. I can't wait to see what happens. Will there be explosions? Oh, or maybe you're gonna turn into a monster kitty. That would be so cool. Or can you do everything a cat can? Najira. Oh, right. Sorry. Ahem, stuffing a handful of the buttery popped kernels into her mouth, miraculously without getting a single drop or crumb on herself somehow, the brunette held up a hand before slicing it downwards dramatically. F.O.X. Literally the second that garbled word was spoken, Naruto vanished in a static blur and reappeared right in front of Mirio mid-leap, with a punch flying straight for the buffer blonde's face, only to end up blinking in confusion when it passed straight through. An illusion. The whiskered blonde wondered as he took in the strange sight of his fist passing through someone's head without a mark, before instinctually twisting in the air to avoid a gut shot. Not one to stay down long, he planted a hand on the ground just before he landed and used his momentum to lash out with a leg sweep. However, right when he was about to hit Mirio, the Tintin lookalikes abruptly fell through the solid ground, while his gym uniform collapsed onto his fellow blonde's extended leg. Okay, so not an illusion, something else, Naruto thought to himself as he shook the clothing off and leapt onto a nearby light post, his gaze darting all over the ground for any sign of movement or disturbance. Must be his quirk thing, but what exactly is it? And why did his clothes? Power. The whiskered teen was cut off mid-thought when he spotted movement in the corner of his eye, followed by a loud battle cry, before he intentionally fell backwards to avoid his fellow blonde that hurtled over him. Hooking himself to the bottom of the post with chakra, Naruto quickly aimed the palm of his hand at Mirio's mostly nude form, thankfully he still had underpants on, as a spiraling ball of condensed air rapidly formed. Fuetin. K's kick. Faster than the blink of an eye, the air sphere shot off and struck the other blonde's back hard enough to send him crashing through a nearby skyscraper window, with a surprised grunt. Swinging back to an upright position, Naruto quickly fired several more blasts at Mirio's down form, but ended up hitting nothing but concrete when the hero in training phased through the floor. Fancy trick you have there, the whiskered blonde stated while backflipping onto another post when his opponent rocketed at him from below, before throwing a trio of shuriken that passed clean through without a scratch. Super annoying and all, but still pretty neat. I could say the same for you, Mirio said as he fell back to the ground, stepping out of the way of another set of shuriken after he landed while rubbing his back. Your speed is crazy and that wind attack of yours hits like a truck. Thanks, I actually just worked it out recently by accident, Naruto admitted with a sheepish grin while rolling his shoulders. Well, I'm all warmed up, how about we actually start taking this seriously? I thought you'd never ga. The buffer blonde started to quip back, only to be cut off when Naruto closed the distance between them in an instant and delivered an uppercut that sent him rocketing back into another window of the same building from before. Smashing clean through the glass and the plaster wall behind it, Mirio had all of 2 seconds to comprehend how much that hurt before Naruto once again appeared right next to him, this time from above with a drop kick that sent him plummeting straight to the floor. However, the young man was just able to activate his quirk before impact, allowing himself to zip straight through all the floors with ease. I knew it, it's not an automatic defense like Gaara's sand, whatever it is he's doing he has to turn on and off himself, Naruto thought as he quickly hopped back out into the open, although instead of returning to his perch, the whiskered blonde opted for the street with his arms crossed and eyes closed. Just need to wait for my opening. As the teen ninja was thinking, his eyes snapped open and he sidestepped out of the way of a certain blonde hero in training that popped up from the ground right behind him. Retaliating with another trio of shuriken, Naruto swore softly when they passed through. Skulchioch. Or at least 2 did, whilst a third dug into his leg briefly before clattering to the floor when he phased away. Aha, so he has to leave parts of himself exposed to stay grounded, perfect. A split second later, the whiskered blonde stepped back to avoid an uppercut and quickly went for a leg sweep, only for his opponent immediately fall through the asphalt. Then he tried to attack from the side and after that from other side and then from behind again and again and again and again. Look like I wasn't the only one who's got wise, Naruto thought in amusement while idly dodging yet another punch, flicking another shuriken at his legs, which predictably passed straight through the buff blonde without harm when he fell through the floor again. This is gonna take a while. And sure enough, for the next several minutes, Mirio would repeatedly use these hit and run rushes from all sides, never once managing to land a blow on his nimble adversary, yet neither could he be struck. From an outside view, i.e. Najira's, it almost appeared like the pair were playing a very strange form of whack-a-mole. However, like all things, this stalemate had to come to an end eventually, or in this case, it was Naruto's patience when he yet again hit nothing but air as Mirio fell back through the earth. This is getting old real fast, dude, you wanna play hide and seek? The whiskered blonde asked rhetorically in annoyance before cocking his arm back and slamming his fist into the ground. Fine then, let's see how well you hide from this. Crock-a-boom. Holy shrap. Najir shouted out through a mouthful of popcorn as that single punch made the entire training zone shake, crack spiderwebbing out in all directions and the ground rippling almost like water as massive hunks of asphalt and cement burst upwards. The bubbly brunette ended up taking to the air, almost dropping her snacks in the process when the ground beneath her bench split and her cast iron seating vanished into the depths of the earth. That turned out to be for the best though, since it meant she was safely out of the way as a few of the closer buildings actually collapsed from the sudden localized impact that completely destroyed their foundations. Oh boy, maybe we should have mentioned that the teachers don't like when we cause excessive damage. Najir thought with a mixture of dread and awe on her face as she took in the utter devastation Naruto had unleashed, wincing slightly when one of the collapsed buildings spontaneously caught fire. Meanwhile, back at ground zero, Naruto ripped his fist free of the crater he'd made and quickly spun around just in time to see Mirio shoot out of the fractured ground facing the wrong way. If he had been the right way, the whiskered teen might have seen the shock and confusion on his fellow blonde's face before quickly turning to pain as he was knocked skyward by a kick to the back of his head. Daze from the first hit, Mirio couldn't react as another Naruto appeared right in front of him from a puff of smoke with a follow-up kick to the chin that sent him even higher. Zoo. Two more whiskered blondes appeared, this time from either side, whom drove their heels into the buff teen's gut, launching him back towards the ground. Maki. Just before impact, the original Naruto intercepted him with a drop kick that blasted him into the asphalt, further obliterating the already wrecked terrain. Naruto Renden. X. Hopping out of the newly formed crater, the whiskered blonde casually dusted off his jacket before peeking into the hole he made curiously, idly noting as a completely flabbergasted Najir landed beside him. You still good to go down there? Oh. I'll take that as I win. Naruto said while grinning victoriously before blinking when his vision was filled with obscured by blue. Oh my gosh, that was so cool. One moment you were here, then you were there, and then way over there. Najir exclaimed excitedly as she grabbed his shoulders and started bouncing around. And then you were like, take that. And everything was whoosh and boom. Well, Mirio was all what? Until you went all wham bam ultra combo. I have literally no idea what anything you just said means. Naruto stated with a tilted head, only to be completely ignored by the rambling student. So what is your quirk anyway? I saw wind stuff and copies and leaping and super speed and wall climbing. Oh, did you get a combined quirk from your parents? Could they do all that cool stuff? Were they also kitty people? Do they per TMMMPGH? Hey, not that this isn't amazingly uncomfortable and all. This time as he spoke, the whiskered blonde pointedly reached out and pinched Najir's lips together, getting the brunette to finally stop talking. But don't you think we should unplant your friend and make sure he's okay? Blinking in confusion at first, Najir's eyes lit up in realization and understanding when Naruto pointed to the crater right as Mirio emerged, surprisingly unharmed aside a black eye, a few scratches, and bruises across his chest and face. Thanks for the concern, but I'm alright, the battered blonde stated as he got to his feet and started dusting himself off, wincing when his back cracking loudly from the movement. Aside from bruised pride and maybe a few bruised ribs, at least. Scratching the back of his head sheepishly, Naruto offered his fellow blonde an apologetic smile. Sorry about that, I might have gone just a bit overboard. Nah, don't worry about it, you gave me fair warning after all. Mirio waved the apology off, his trademark grin back in place as he patted his fellow blonde on the back. At the exact same time though, yet another building nearby suddenly started collapsing, causing both blondes to blink in surprise before apparently finally noticing all the devastation around them. By the way, did I forget to mention that the teachers generally don't like it when we cause a lot of excess damage? Yes you did. Ah whoops. MMMPH. MPH, MMMMPH. Najir mumbled out unintelligibly while waving her hands around wildly, getting the pair of blondes to stare at her in confusion. What? Mumbling incoherently even more, the brunette paused mid-mutter to pry Naruto's hand away from her mouth. I said that was totally what I was just thinking earlier. Well, that and how that super punch was kinda like one of All Might's famous smashes. You should have seen it, Mirio, he was all like, hide from this. And everything went kaboom. I could believe it, Mirio muttered with a nod as he turned his head from side to side in order to take in the mess that used to be a simulated city block before focusing back on Naruto again. You fight kinda like him too, was he our inspiration? You mean that loud guy everyone talks about on TV? Looks kinda like you but bigger with weird antenna hair, spooky skeleton eyes, and always screaming I am here whenever he shows up. Naruto asked with a quirked brow while holding his hands up at his head in a V shape, making the two students blink a few times. BFFFFT hahaha. Hahaha. Before promptly erupting into fits of laughter. Well, I never heard him described quite like that, but yes, that would be who I meant. Mirio said between chuckles while Najire had to lean against him for support to keep herself from falling over. Then I'd have to say no, the whiskered blonde said with a shake of his head. Although he does remind me a lot of bushy brows and super bushy brows, now that I think about it. Meanwhile. Achoo. Both Guy and Lee sneezed at the exact same time as they were doing push-ups with huge boulders strapped to their backs, the sudden distraction causing them both to faceplant with the earth. That was random, maybe someone is talking about you guys. Tenten said from the sidelines while sharpening her various weapons, giggling as she watched the spandex-wearing duo struggling to get free of their earthy confines. And back. Suo, should we clean this up or what? Naruto asked while jabbing his thumb at the wrecked simulated city. No worries, the repair drones will get to it in a bit, Mirio said with a dismissive wave of her hand. With them and Cementus, this place will be back in tip-top shape by tomorrow. Crash. By the day after tomorrow. The buff blonde corrected sheepishly as one of the half-destroyed buildings collapsed fully. Then I think I should head back to Nurse Granny's before she gets impatient. Naruto said, getting nods of agreement from Mirio and Najire once the latter managed to get her laughter under control. Now that sounds like a good idea to me, although she's definitely gonna be grouchy when she sees me. Mirio said while rubbing the growing bruise on his cheek before walking over to where his discarded gym uniform had landed. I hope she has been able to help out Ragdoll-san out, Najire mumbled softly, her natural good mood dimming a bit when she remembered the condition the heroine had been when they last saw her. However, not even a second later it was right back to full exuberance as she bounced in place. Who am I kidding, recovery girl is the best of the best, so she's probably already all better. I wonder what happened to her. Oh, perhaps she'll be able to tell us what happened. Maybe her quirk was stressed out from a hard mission, or maybe she was trying a new super move and it didn't work out like planned. Only one way to find out, let's get going. Naruto said as he headed off. Recovery girl's office is this way, silly. Only for Najire to grab his arm and pull him in the exact opposite direction he was headed. I knew that, I was just taking the scenic route. The whiskered blonde offered weakly, making the bubbly heroine giggle at the terrible excuse. I guess that means you'll have plenty of time to answer all my questions, then, right? Ooh. And don't forget to pet his whiskers some more. Mirio chipped in helpfully as he rejoined the duo fully dressed once more, earning himself an annoyed look from Naruto when Najire did just that with an excited cheer. End chapter. Chapter 8. Whack thwack. Naruto and Mirio winced with sheepish looks as they were whacked over the head by recovery girl's cane, the elderly woman giving them both the stink eye, while Najire stood off to the side. All four of them were once again in the medical ward where the more battered of the blondes could get patched up. However, it seemed that Mirio hadn't been completely honest about how hurt he'd gotten, which was evident by the large number of bandages and ice packs currently strapped to his chest. Kids these days, I can't let one of them out of my sight for 5 minutes these days without them getting into some sort of trouble. Recovery girl grumbled, continuing to glower at the pair of blondes as she filled out a series of forms on a clipboard. Come on, it wasn't that bad, recovery girl, we just went a little tiny bit overboard with a friendly spar. Mirio said while rubbing the back of his head with his iconic smile. However, the deadpan he got from the elderly woman told him that that had been the wrong thing to say. Not that bad, you say? Well then, let's just see what the chart has to say about that, shall we? Holding up the papers she'd just finished filling out, recovery girl cleared her throat dramatically before reading aloud. 6 fractured ribs. 2 of which were almost completely broken, a fractured scapula, a concussion, severe internal and external bruising of the abdomen, mild internal bruising, several first and second degree burns, and no less than 5 stab wounds. Okay, so we went very overboard. The muscular blonde admitted with a chuckle as the medical-themed heroine rolled her eyes with an exasperated yet ever slightly amused sking. I swear nobody has any common sense anymore, she muttered under her breath while handing the clipboard off to a medicbot to file away before slowly shambling over to check on Ragdoll, who was asleep once more. If it wasn't for the fact that I have other things to attend to, I'd be giving all 3 of you a nice long lecture about not being a bunch of reckless idiots. While Naruto sighed in relief and Mirio chuckled at the healing hero's words, a confused Najire tilted her head and pointed at herself. All 3? What did I do? You were acting as ref yet didn't stop those 2 knuckleheads from beating each other black and blue, even after they leveled an entire training zone. But it was such a cool fight though, Najire said with sparkles in her eyes, literally bouncing in place. Naruto was all swoosh and blam, while Mirio kept dodging with his quirk until. Man, and people say I never shut up. Naruto thought with a soft chuckle as Najire continued to mime out the entire fight for what had to be the 10th time in a row already, along with an ever-growing list of possibilities that she'd come up with for what his quirk could actually be. Ah Naruto, there you are, this time though her rambling was cut short by a knock on the door before the familiar face of Nemuri peeked in with a smirk. I should have figured you'd have ended up back here already. And what's that supposed to mean? The whiskered blonde asked with a narrowed gaze as he crossed his arms. Well obviously it's because you're a total trouble magnet bestie, even I could tell you that. Toga chipped in playfully as her head popped in below the adult-rated heroines with a cheeky grin. Hey. I am not. Naruto said with an indignant huff while crossing his arms in annoyance as he glowered at the ever-blushing blonde. However, his annoyance was quick to fade away into concern when he noticed how the girl's eyes were slightly bloodshot and puffy, showing that she had been crying recently, despite her apparent jovial mood. Guess her talk with the counselor guy got pretty emotional. Of course you're not, you just happen to run into all sorts of misadventures every time you're left alone for more than 5 minutes, the blonde was snapped out of his thoughts by Nemuri, grabbing his shoulder with a playfully sarcastic drawl and pulling him out of his seat. Now come on you little trouble attractant, I need to get you two back to roomies before you draw on something really annoying for us to deal with. I'm not that bad, Naruto grumbled as he shrugged the adult-rated heroine off although still followed after her while grumbling under his breath. Stopping on the way out briefly, he looked back with a grin to wave to the students and elderly healer. It was nice meeting you guys, and if you ever want a rematch just let me know Mirio. You can bet on it. The intangible teen said with a competitive smirk of his own, while cracking his neck for added emphasis before wincing as a deadpanning recovery girl gave him an extra whack on the head with her cane. Oh, already. But we were having so much fun too the ever-energetic brunette known as Najire deflated with an adorable pout, giving off a perfect kicked puppy vibe that just wrenched at the heartstrings. However, as per the course, she just as quickly perked back up to her normal cheery self as she waved enthusiastically. Maybe we can hang out again later, for lunch or perhaps we could go hang out in an arcade. I love arcades. Especially this one in downtown which has this awesome dancing game and a fun little skee ball tournament where the winner gets free pizza all day. Oh, that sounds like fun. Count us in. Toga popped right back into view with a huge grin before she was promptly scooped up onto Naruto's shoulder as he walked past her. Great. I'll set up reservations right away. Bye kiddies. The spiral-haired teen said before pulling out her cell phone and excitedly dialing in a number at blinding speed. She's gonna call us that forever now, isn't she? Naruto asked rhetorically as a giggling Toga continued to wave even though the others were already out of sight. Most likely you adorable little kitten, Nemuri said in a seductively teasing tone, while scratching the whiskered blonde's head like one would a pet, making him roll his eyes in exasperation and swat the limb away with a soft grumble about not being adorable. Besides it's quite fitting if you ask me, you two even have matching collars. Oh yeah. Check it, we're totally twinsies now bestie. Nimbly flipping herself around so she was now sitting on Naruto's shoulders, Toga leaned forward till she was facing Naruto upside down and pulled on her jacket to reveal the new tracker strapped firmly around her neck. You know, most people wouldn't be so excited about having these. Naruto pointed out with a raised brow before rolling his eyes in amusement when his fellow blonde just stuck her tongue out playfully. I find it better to enjoy the silver lining than to wallow with a dingy cloud. Toga flipped herself again, so she was doing a handstand on the blonde's shoulder, then allowing herself to fall back until she landed perfectly behind Naruto. Giving a short bow to her audience, the bloodthirsty blonde was quick to catch up to the other two, settling into an even gait beside her self-proclaimed bestiest bestie. Life's too short to always be stuck on the negatives anyway, wouldn't you agree bestie? Hey, I can't say you're wrong, the whiskered teen shrugged before smirking mischievously. But if you want to be twinsies. Briefly reaching into his pocket, Naruto pulled out a rag and started wiping his hand, which was suddenly covered in ink, while Nemuri started giggling for some reason. Confused, Toga opened her mouth to ask only to stop as she felt a soft tickling across her cheeks caused her to grab her face as she sat up. Then you can't forget the whiskers. He finished with a chuckle just as they passed by a large window, the reflection on the glass allowing Toga to see that she now had nearly identical whisker marks drawn to his own on her cheeks. Oh, I could get used to these. Coming to a stop right in front of the glass, the newly whiskered girl started striking poses from classic model to pretending to be a pouncing tiger. Sadly though her fun was short-lived as she accidentally smeared the ink of her whiskers while pretending to be a pouting puppy. Aw man, you guys think we could stop at a tattoo parlor and… Yeah, nipping that one in the bud right now, not happening kid, Nemuri cut the girl off, making her pout, while Naruto wiped the ink off her cheeks before the perplet grabbed them both by the collar and started pulling them along once more. Now stop stalling and get moving already, I've got places to be and shit to do besides babysitting you two all day. Alright, we're coming, no need to get your panties in a bunch. Naruto grumbled while pulling himself free and readjusting his jacket. You're assuming she even wears panties to get bunched bestie. Toga added with a giggle before both her and Naruto turned to the adult-rated heroine curiously. Noticing the look she was getting, Midnight rolled her eyes and playfully smacked them both across the head. Get your heads out of the gutter, just because I'm rated adults only doesn't mean I go around without underwear all the time. But you used to run around in nothing but a microkini and belt, occasionally with a trench coat when it was colder. So why wouldn't we think that? Toga pointed out bluntly with a knowing smirk, causing Naruto to stumble at the mental picture, while Midnight held her hands up in mock surrender. Alright, you got me there, but my point re my hey. The pro-heroine tried to say before she was cut off when Toga suddenly pantsed her without warning. And it seemed that Toga's little theory was true as she and Naruto were greeted by the unobstructed view, smooth creamy hips, ass and thighs, causing the latter to pass out with a nosebleed of epic proportions. Haha. I knew it. You do go commando. I knew it, I knew it, I knew it. I really should have seen this coming, Nemuri muttered with a facepalm as Toga danced and cheered around her. You can quit the theatrics, blondie, it's not what it looks like, see? Stopping mid-dance, Toga watched the woman grab the side of her hip and pulled, revealing that bare waist was actually covered by a pair of light tan spats that matched her skin tone. Ooh, now that's clever, the blood-loving teen said while clapping in approval. Those must be fun to mess with people's heads with. Only on days that end with a Y. The adult-rated heroine retorted with a teasing smile as she pulled her pants back up. After making sure everything was nice and tightly secured once more, she then walked over and hefted Naruto off the floor before promptly dropping him into Toga's arms. Wow, he's a lot lighter than he looks, the blushing blonde muttered in surprise when she found that she could almost effortlessly hold the unconscious teen. I think he might actually weigh less than I do. I wonder what his secret is. You can ask him later, Midnight stated as she continued walking, forcing Toga to hurry along after her before she was left behind. If we hurry we can still beat the afternoon traffic. Later. Damn it. Woo's it? Naruto jerked back to consciousness as a loud swear rang out, followed by a muffled thumping sound. Looking around blearily, the whiskered blonde blinked a few times to clear his vision and found himself in the backseat of Nemuri's car alongside Toga, who was humming in her seat with a content smile. Toga, was that you? Nope, it was Ms. Road Rage, she said in a mock whisper as she gestured up in the driver's seat, where Nemuri could be found leaning her head against the rim of the steering with a frustrated groan. Then she pointed out the window where Naruto could see nothing but cars, trucks, and other such automobiles all crammed together in the street. We've been stuck in this same spot for almost 10 minutes now and she's this close to snapping. If you keep up with that smart mouthing of yours, the only thing that'll be snapping is my whip across your behind. The pro-hero said, raising her head up to glower at the blonde girl through the rearview mirror. A vein started to bulge on her forehead though when Toga just stuck out her tongue and pulled down an eyelid in response. So what's up with all the cars? Something happen? Naruto asked while peering out the window. No, just the normal midday traffic I was hoping to avoid, Nemuri grumbled sourly before taking a few deep breaths to calm down as the cars finally started to move again. While a mere snail's pace at first, it soon picked up as the roads cleared out until they were cruising along at a decent pace. About damn time, I swear if we were stuck for one more minute I wah. The perplet was abruptly cut off, both verbally and physically, as the front of a building half a block ahead of them abruptly exploded. Nearby cars were sent toppling away and debris rained down everywhere as the air was quickly clogged up with a huge cloud of thick black smog that made it almost impossible to see anything more than 10 feet away. Shit. Slamming on the brakes, Nemuri barely managed to swerve out of the way of another car careening right towards them before diving under the dashboard as shrapnel peppered through the windshield. Unfortunately, this left her driving blind and within seconds she ended up steering straight into a street lamp. Stars filled the pro-heroine's vision as her head smacked against the radio while the air was knocked out of her lungs by the airbag slammed into the side of her chest. Dazed and gasping for breath, it was only thanks to years of training and experience that Nemuri was able to stay lucid enough to recognize Naruto as he pulled her out of the car. Then the next thing she knew he was setting her down again, this time atop a roof several buildings away alongside Toga, who had a piece of metal embedded in her shoulder that a clone was helping her with. Hey, can you hear me? Are you alright? The whiskered blonde asked, cupping the perplexed cheek and gently turning her head to get a better look at the bruise already rapidly spreading across the side of her face. Quit it, I'm fine, just a few bumps and bruises, she grumbled once she regained her breath, trying to swat away his hand before grabbing her arm with a hiss when a sharp pain shot through it. Okay, and maybe a broken arm. Let me look, not waiting for permission, Naruto grabbed Nemuri's arm and pulled the sleeve out of the way to reveal another bruise that covering almost the entire limb. Yikes, we need to get that in a splint pronto. It can wait, I have a job to do still. The adult-rated heroine said as she tried to get up only to get pushed right back down by the whiskered blonde. "Oh no you don't, you are gonna stay right there and let me fix that arm," he stated with a stern look as he got to work splinting her arm. "Besides boss can handle whatever mess is going on down there just fine." "Boss?" Nemuri repeated in confusion before her eyes widened in realization once it clicked in her head. "Oh god damn it, you're just a clone too, aren't you?" "Bingo, boss is down below dealing with whatever the hell caused that mess." The revealed clone stated as he jerked his head towards the smoke billowing out from the blown up building. "That's what I was afraid of. Look, he doesn't have a license to use his powers legally in public," Midnight said as she once again tried to get up without success as the clone tending to her kept her firmly held in place. "Even you being around is illegal enough, he's going to get himself thrown in jail for vigilantism at this rate." "Actually that only applies to quirks, and last I checked boss doesn't have a quirk," the whiskered blonde duplicate stated with a cheeky smirk as the woman froze with an unsure expression. "So how can he be arrested for breaking the law if he can't actually break the law in the first place?" Midnight remained silent as she was unable to think of a rebuttal, considering the clone blonde was technically correct. After all, with a scientifically proven quirk factor of 0, Naruto was for all intents and purposes quirkless, which in turn meant that none of the laws about quirks actually applied to his abilities. Bestie, say what now?" Meanwhile a now very confused Toga asked as her head snapped towards Midnight's clone with a raised brow. And besides, however, the bloodthirsty girl was ignored by the other Naruto as he continued. "Even if that isn't enough, boss is going with plan B just to be safe." "What's plan B?" both ladies asked in confusion, which just made the clone smirk knowingly before a loud crashing was heard down below, followed by distant shouts and swearing. "Back on the ground, 1 minute earlier." "Move it. Move it." Back at ground zero, a brunette woman dressed in a form-fitting all-black infiltration outfit and a purple-tinted suction-on face shield that hid her well face, hollered out at 3 men and 2 women, all wearing similar outfits who rushed out of the wrecked building. Half of them were laden with armloads of expensive-looking tech and machinery, while the other half flanked them protectively as they booked it through the smoggy area. Expertly weaving through the various debris and cars littering their path, the group made their way to a large van that had been carefully hidden away in a nearby alley. "Alright, everything is on schedule. Let's keep it that way." The masked woman snipped while pulling the side open so her group could climb inside with their loot. As soon as the last one was in, she slammed the door shut and jumped into the driver's seat, turning the key that was already in the ignition. However, the engine didn't even have a chance to turn over thanks to a purple and white clad foot that slammed into the hood, squashing the entire front end of the van into the asphalt. But the foo was all the thief was able to get out before another foot smashed through the windshield and straight into her masked face. Watching the driver slump over in her seat, the rest of the criminals could only stare in shock as the leg responsible was pulled back, shattering the rest of the windshield in the process, revealing none other than the number 5 hero of Japan herself. Well, seems you guys are having some car trouble," Mirko said from atop the smushed hood with a wide grin on her lips as she cracked her knuckles and neck at the same time. "How about I lend you a hand? I know this great little place called prison that could fix up all your travel problems for at least the next 10 to 20 years. Shit. Oh, fuck. What the hell is she doing here? Bail. Bail." Snapping out of their dazes as she spoke, chaos erupted in the vehicle as the masked thieves scrambled out as quickly as they could. "Eat hot ash hero." The first one to get out, a black-haired man with pepper gray skin visible around his mask, held an ungloved hand towards the bunny heroine and fired a concentrated stream of smoke from a strange smoldering mark on his palm that engulfed her form in a second. Pulling off the glove on his other hand with his teeth to reveal another mark, he blasted even more smoke from it as well as the air rapidly grew hotter by the second. "Forget the gear. Grab Nitra and go guys, I'll hold her off as long as I can." The other thieves didn't hesitate to do as their comrades said and tossed aside their ill-gotten gains, while one of them, a short girl with slimy-looking orange hair, stretched out an arm several feet to grab Nitra from the driver's seat. However, they only got about 10 feet away before a rising kick to the chin knocked the smoke-quirked man several feet up in the air before he was swiftly kicked straight back down, slamming face first into the unforgiving ground with a loud crack of shattering glass. Groaning in pain, the smoke-quirked man briefly tried to get up only to collapse a second later, leaving a soot-covered and slightly burnt but otherwise unharmed Mirko to step over his unconscious body. "Well, that was boring, who's next?" Smog. A man with brown hair and 3 faces, based on how he wore 3 different masks around his head, called out in shock before clenching his fists in anger. "You bitch. I'll. Triplex don't. You'll get caught too." The stretchy orange girl said as she grabbed the multi-faced man with her other arm. "We need to get out of here now." "Keiko's right, you guys go. Me and Amp will keep Miss Hero here busy." The other woman of the group, who was tall and quite muscular with short black hair, stated as she and the last guy, a stout man with short black hair as well, stood between the three and the white tee. "DRRR fine, be careful Circuit." Triplex growled out as he turned to leave with Takeo and Nitra. Gah. Only to end up joining his friend on the ground when his frontmost face was intimately introduced to Mirko's fist, shocking all of the thieves as they snapped their gaze to where she had just been standing and then back again in disbelief. "You actually thought I was just gonna let you run away like that? How cute." The rabid heroine said with a chuckle at their dumbfounded expressions before charging straight at them. Faster than most of the villains could even blink, she stuck both raven-haired thieves with a sweeping kick that sent them flying into an upturned car and a dumpster respectively, then spun around to slam a foot into Triplex's head when he started to get back up. Takeo stepped back as Mirko turned towards her next, her legs trembling in terror as the white tee stared her down with an almost predatory gleam in her eyes. "Not so fast bitch." Several cables suddenly burst out of the ground and coiled around the pro-hero like snakes, quickly burying her under a pile of writhing rubber and metal cutiesy of Circuit as she gripped a light post with a glowing hand. At the same time Amp pulled himself out of the trash and, after wiping off the coffee grounds stuck to his mask, fired several blasts of violet electricity at the bound heroine. "Go Takeo. Get out of here." The girl didn't have to be told twice as she ran away as quickly as her legs could carry her with Nitra in tow. Pulling her hands off the ground, Circuit instead placed them on the car behind her, causing the entire thing to split apart into its separate parts and fly towards the entrapped heroine. Then the masked woman clasped her hands together, causing both the wires and car parts to compress down even further as Amp ramped up his quirk so the metal began to heat up, effectively welding everything together. "Ah, that should keep her for a while," Amp muttered breathlessly once he finally stopped blasting, his arms twitching and spasming rapidly as stray sparks still flickered between his fingers. The result of their combined attack being a lumpy metal heap roughly the same shape as their foe. "Assuming the bitch is still alive after all of that anyway. Let's not stick around to find out," Circuit stated while grabbing Amp's arm. "Luna fall." And promptly eating asphalt as both of them were struck over the head by a pair of drop kicks that knocked them both out instantly, all courtesy of Mirko. Well, that was easy, landing between the unconscious thieves in a crouch, the strangely immaculate bunny pro-hero pretended to dust her hands off as she stood up. She cocked an eyebrow though when she saw the misshapen smoking statue of herself, then at the other two knocked out thieves, the half-crushed van, and the mess left in the street, before turning to the whiskered blonde sitting on an upended mailbox. "What the hell have you dragged me into?" "I'll explain later, you might want to worry about the two ladies trying to make their getaway first," Naruto replied while pointing to the fleeing thieves, making Mirko smirk as she sprinted after them. "Almost there, just a little further," Takeo muttered as ran as quickly as she could with Nitra in her arms while frequently glancing over her shoulder worriedly. "Boy. Where the hell do you think you're going, punk?" Beep. And it was thanks to those constant paranoid looks that the orange tee saw and was just narrowly able to avoid the flying kick aimed at her head by making her entire head flatten like a piece of paper. Stumbling to a stop as her head sprang back to normal shape with a muffled pop, a scared whimper escaped her lips at the sight of Mirko standing in her path. "Not bad reflexes, this might actually be some fun," the bunny heroine said with an excited grin as she thumped her foot eagerly, cracking the sidewalk a bit. "Eek. Stay away from me." The girl shrieked before her and Nitra's body squished down like an accordion as Mirko flew over her once again, then contorting into a U-shape when the white tee tried to hit them with a spin kick. Stopping on a light post, Mirko quickly launched herself back and unleashed a flurry of kicks and punches at blinding speeds. However, Takeo continued to contort herself and her partner around the rabbit woman's attacks, leaving her to hit nothing but thin air over and over. Yet rather than being annoyed by this, Mirko only seemed to get more excited by the second as her grin practically split her face in half. Gotcha. After about an entire minute of continuous back and forth though, Takeo's constant shifting started to slow down until the white tee finally managed to get a solid hit in. On what exactly she wasn't sure, but it was enough to knock the contorting girl off her feet and tumbling away several feet, eventually skidding to a stop in the middle of the empty street and popping back to normal. "That was a nice workout, kid, but it's time to wrap this up." "No, get away," the thief whimpered out breathlessly, part of her mask broken away to reveal a tearing up orange eye, dilated in fear. "No can do," Mirko stated while punching the palm of her hand. "Now we can do this the easy way or the fun way, your choice." And choose Takeo did, albeit the choice she went with was unexpected to say the least. "I said get away." In a move that completely caught Mirko off guard, the orange tee grabbed Nitra's arm and tore the limb off with a sickening squelch. Before the pro-hero could even comprehend this seemingly pointless act of betrayal against her unconscious companion, Takeo hurled the severed limb right at her. With how tired the girl was though, the arm barely even made it about 10 feet before flopping against the ground uselessly. It did succeed in getting Mirko to stop though as she stared at the bleeding limb with a blank expression and her eyebrows vanished into her hairline. Okay, what the? That was all she managed to say before her vision was engulfed by a searing white light. A gay groan escaped Mirko's lips as her senses slowly came back to her, first with her hearing which made her wince as a loud ringing echoed in her ears. Blinking several times as her vision started to return next, the rabbit woman found herself flat on the ground with Naruto kneeling beside her. "Hey, are you okay? Can you hear me?" he asked in concern while gently slapping her cheek before she swatted it away. "I'm fine, it takes more than a little," Mirko grumbled as she started to sit up only to trail off when she saw the huge smoldering crater in the middle of the street. Meanwhile, dozens of emergency vehicles were cordoning the area off with the help of a few low-ranked local heroes. "Damn, what happened? That girl you were fighting threw an exploding severed arm at you," Naruto stated bluntly as he grabbed the rabbit woman's arm and helped her up to her feet. "And before you ask, she got away, disappeared right after the arm blew up." "Yeah, I figured as much, she was definitely a slippery one," stretching a bit, Mirko sighed as several joints popped before patting off the dust and soot all over her body. "But that'll just make it all the more fun when I kick her ass next time." "That's assuming there is a next time," Naruto pointed out, making the white tee look back at him with a challenging smirk. "Oh, there will be," she said while plucking a small chunk of cement out of her side and flicking it into the crater. "Even if I have to track her down myself for it to happen." "If you say so, but let's worry about that later. First we should probably get out of here before they get down and mob us with questions," the whiskered blonde said while jabbing a thumb up at the rooftops where hundreds of confused-looking men and women were being helped down by the police and firemen. "Sure, sounds good to me." Mirko nodded in agreement as the duo hurried out of the area. "By the way, what was the deal with that metal statue of me in the alley? Funny story about that actually." End chapter. Chapter 9. Last time. "If you say so, but let's worry about that later. First we should probably get out of here before they get down and mob us with questions," the whiskered blonde said while jabbing a thumb up at the rooftops where hundreds of confused-looking men and women were being helped down by the police and firemen. "Sure, sounds good to me." Mirko nodded in agreement as the duo hurried out of the area. "By the way, what was the deal with that metal statue of me in the alley? Funny story about that actually." And now, several months later. Snow fell from the sky in a thick flurry that blanketed the entire city in a sheet of pure white wherever one looked. This in turn perfectly contrasted the lovely array of holiday decorations that had been set up all over, from the colorful lights set up to the city-goers themselves wearing festive outfits. Several pine trees, both real and artificial, were sporadically set up with a ton of ornaments, while ropes of tinsel were hung across the air from buildings and streetlights. Get your Christmas gifts here. Special holiday discounts abound. Wish your loved ones a Merry Christmas with our limited edition Santamite figure. Don't delay, get your Xmas spirit on with our brand new special blend of hero eggnog, offers limited while supplies last. And of course you can't forget the obligatory massive amount of holiday-themed advertisements that were being blasted from all directions. Midnight thought while standing in a small park in her civilian wear, rolling her eyes good-naturedly as she sipped from a holiday-themed cup of coffee. It wasn't like the adult-rated heroine had much room to speak seeing as she'd signed off on a deal for her own Christmas merch line, which was naturally selling rather well. In fact, a quick glance at her phone showed that the last Naughty Elf Midnight posters had just sold out entirely after being out only a day. That'll be a nice little bonus. While she wasn't interested in becoming filthy rich, it was still nice to know she'd have a nice nest egg saved up for the future. Although what she was getting was nothing compared to the revenue Mirko was no doubt raking in since her popularity had skyrocketed. This was mostly in part due to her cracking down on dozens of villains during her relentless pursuit of the criminals known as Nitra and Teiko, the bunny heroine still harboring a bit of a grudge over the whole exploding arm incident. However, despite her best efforts and reluctantly cooperating with a few other pro-heroes, the villainous duo had proven themselves far too elusive since their failed heist. Not only that, but somehow their accomplices had managed to escape custody shortly after their arrest, though nobody could figure out how or even when exactly. While Mirko personally considered this nothing short of failure, the public viewed her determined efforts as nothing short of valiant and awe-inspiring. Naturally, this had the result in her rising up in the hero rankings, jumping from 5th to 3rd in the recent polling, though whether or not it'd be a lasting boost was up in the air. In either case, that in turn caused an ever-predictable spike in demand for all things Mirko, from merch to cameos to sponsorship requests. The bunny babe found herself under a practical deluge of demands. Ugh, I still can't believe they kept this thing around. Speaking of whom, Mirko herself was standing beside her fellow pro-heroine in uniform, albeit a distinctively holiday-themed version of her usual hero suit. Design-wise it was basically the same, just that the colors of white and purple swapped for red and dark green, while a set of bells were wrapped around her waist like a belt. As for why the festively dressed rabbit woman was annoyed, that'd be thanks to a certain statue that could seen proudly on display. The misshapen metal construction of Mirko created by the villain's amp and circuit to trap a disguised shadow clone pretending to be the rabbit heroine had ended up being turned into a public monument to said heroine. I don't see what the big deal is, shouldn't you be flattered that even the villains want to make art of you? Midnight asked jokingly as she elbowed Mirko's side, which made the white tea grumble even more under her breath. Come on, don't be such a sourpuss, it's the holidays. The time for cheer and goodwill and all that fun jazz. Easy for you to say, you don't have a bunch of reporters hounding your ass about your supposed love life. The now number 3 pro heroine said, crossing her arms over her chest with a huff when Midnight giggled in amusement. Well, what did you expect would happen once people found out you were living with a strapping young lad like Naruto? Yup, alongside with her newfound popularity came a deep interest in Mirko's personal life, and all too soon the paparazzi found out about the bunny woman's current living situation. More specifically about the mysterious young man, i.e. Naruto, that had been making headlines already was actually living with the heroine. And gossip be as gossip does, all too soon there were a million different theories for why had been splattered all over the internet. Everything from Naruto being Mirko's protege and or secret child to claims of her grooming him as her personal fuck toy. Whatever, shaking her head with a dismissive huff, Mirko allowed her gaze to drift from her amalgamation self-portrait to the surrounding area. Why the hell are we even here anyway? Wait, what do you mean? You asked me to come here, so shouldn't I be asking you that? Midnight asked back while pointing a finger at the rabbit heroine with a raised brow. No, you told me to come here, you told me over the phone that we needed to meet up for something important. Mirko refuted, making the adult-rated heroine blink as her brow rose even higher. That's not right, you called. There you two are, a new voice cut in, causing both ladies to turn and see Mount Lady walking to them in her usual hero wear and an annoyed look. She was rubbing her arms with a grimace as she shivered, a modest dusting of snow clinging to her shoulders until she shook it off. This had better be good because I had to walk all the way here thanks to the freaking traffic and it is freezing out. Mount Lady? What are you doing here? Midnight and Mirko asked at the same time, causing the growing blonde to scowl even more. Are you kidding me? You jerks called me up in the middle of my shift to come here and don't even remember. We've been set up, haven't we? Midnight asked with a dull look, causing a look of dawning realization to appear on both Mirko and Mount Lady's faces. Fire. Sadly for all three of them though, that realization would be just a second too late as they were suddenly beset by a barrage of snowballs. In a blink both Mount Lady and Midnight both got a face full of powdery ice that knocked them on their asses, while Mirko barely avoided the same fate thanks to her reflexes. Holding her arms up protectively around her head, the bunny heroine scowled as the snowballs splattered across her body. Tracking the attacks back to their source, her gaze narrowed upon seeing a familiar whiskered face smirking back at her. Naruto. You are so dead. Oh no, I'm so scared. The otherworldly blonde retorted between snickers as he kept hurling snowballs at the trio alongside Toga, Mirio, Tamaki, and Najire. The relentless barrage was slowly burying the bunny heroine while her companions scrambled to cover behind her statue. You will be. Not even bothering to hide, Mirko ignored the barrage of icy projectiles as she got down on one knee and scooped up as much snow as she could at once. Quickly squishing it together into one large snowball almost twice as big as she was, she hefted it off the ground and over her head with a manic grin. Oh, Naruto muttered before the rabbit hurled the massive lump of snow at them with all her might. Scatter. Nobody needed to be told twice as the team split up in all directions, narrowly avoiding getting squished under the massive snowball. However, both Toga and Tamaki were hit by blowback when it hit the ground and basically exploded outwards in 1,000 fist-sized chunks. Meanwhile, Najire got a taste of her own medicine when she got pegged by a flurry of shots courtesy of Midnight and Mount Lady. Mirio and Naruto were the only ones that got away unscathed, the former taking cover behind a mailbox as he reloaded while the latter slid under a bench. Hopping up on the other side, the whiskered blonde had all of half a second to see Mirko, with yet another giant clump of snow in hand before he bolted once more. Zigzagging around the park, the blonde grabbed a light post mid-turn, causing him to pivot in the opposite direction just in time to avoid the second large snowball that flew by, grazing his fingers. Time seemed to slow as he spun around to face Mirko, who was already armed with a third big but noticeably smaller snowball held up and ready to throw. The bunny heroine had a smirk on her lips as she was about to toss that ball right in that boy's smug face, only for Naruto to smirk and reveal a snowball in his free hand too. Winding his arm back extra dramatically, the blonde flung this one with a twist of his wrist, which somehow caused the ball to actually spiral through the air. Mirko only had enough time to blink before the spiraling snowball slammed upwards into her chin, spraying snow all over her face and up her nose. Yelping in surprise, the white tea reflexively tried to wipe off the offending substance, only to end up with her head buried in the snowball she'd been holding in the first place. The FFFFT. Hahaha. Naruto could not help but burst into laughter as he watched Mirko stumble around blindly with her head covered in snow. Doubling over as he slid to a stop, he almost fell on his ass when the bunny woman ended up tripping on the end of the sidewalk and falling into the heap she was using to make her snowballs. Oh man, that was ga. Ha. Gotcha punk. Unfortunately, with his focus on Mirko, Naruto was left wide open to a volley of attacks from behind, causing him to fall flat on his face. The culprit, Mount Lady, pumped her fist in victory with a smirk before yelping and ducking behind cover when Toga and Najire started firing at her again. A little help over here, Midnight. Bit busy already. The adult-rated heroine retorted, ducking and weaving to avoid getting hit as she traded shots with Mirio. However, even without using his quirk, the muscular teen proved to be quite light on his feet, displaying an impressive level of parkour as he almost effortlessly avoided every snowball she flung his way. Hold still, you nimble little bapa. SS sorry. Tamaki called out softly after hitting the art teacher right in the mouth as she was talking, making her swallow a bunch of snow by accident. Sadly for the shy teen though, all his apology achieved was giving Midnight a target as her gaze snapped toward him with a burning passion as she held up a pair of snowballs. Hailing, the poor guy bolted with the adult-rated heroine hot on his trail, leaving Mirio without an opponent, not that he seemed to mind, as he just shrugged and watched the rest of the chaos that was unfolding around him. Speaking of, back over by Mirko, a muffled growl was heard before she slammed her head against the ground, shattering the snowball encasing it and revealing her angry red face. Her gaze locking onto Naruto as he was dusting himself off, her lips curled up into a smirk as she shoved her hands into the snow. Damn, can't believe I let my guard down like that, Naruto grumbled to himself, though he seemed more amused than upset as he shook off the snow on his back. As he was trying to get a particularly stubborn clump that was sticking to his neck though, the blonde abruptly bent over nearly 90 degrees to avoid Mirko's snow-covered fist that soared over him. Snapping back up, he then sidestepped a drop kick from the bunny lady's equally snow-encased foot. You know, I don't think those count as snowballs. It's close enough. She exclaimed while continuing to throw punches and kicks with blinding speed, all of which the whiskered teen dodged. Hold still, damn it. Okay. To Mirko's sheer surprise, Naruto did in fact hold still, completely stopping out of the blue and catching her leg when she hit his side with a sweeping kick, pinning it in place with his arm. Hey. Trying to get her limb free, the bunny heroine grimaced as Naruto held it in place like a bear trap, not budging even a centimeter. Kicking and punching at him the best she could, her frustration only grew when he didn't even flinch, just letting the blows land with that damnable smirk on his lips. A growl tore from her lips as she eventually resorted to planting her free foot against the blonde's chest and pushing with all her might. Alright, you smartass. Let me go. Okay. Yet again the blonde complied and let his grip go slack, making Mirko yelp out when she sent herself flying like a snapped rubber band. Skipping across the snow-covered ground, she ended up crashing into the base of her statue, knocking all the snow that had built up on it onto herself. Slowly sitting back up, the cold powder fell away from the pro-hero's face to show her unamused glare as she glowered at the still smirking blonde. Anything else you'd like me to do? He asked cheekily, making her eyebrow twitch rapidly as several veins bulged on her forehead. Just one. In a burst of speed that surprised even Naruto, Mirko closed the distance between them and tackled Naruto right into a snow mound. Eat snow, you cocky bastard. Many hours later. Everyone was over at Rumi's home, soaked to the bone and covered with towels to dry off, yet all of them with smiles on their faces. Well, except Tamaki, who had his face against a wall in another one of his iconic bouts of shyness. Meanwhile, Ray was going around offering cups of tea, coffee and cocoa to help everyone warm back up. Oh man, I haven't had a good old-fashioned snowball fight like that in years, Rumi, now clad in a dry plain white t-shirt and purple shorts, said with a chuckle as she used a rag to get the water out of her ears. Flopping on the couch next to Naruto, who'd also changed into a t-shirt and short only black and orange, the bunny lady clapped him on the back with laugh. And luring us out there like that, oh man, you really got us good. What can I say, I am the king of pranksters, the blonde boasted jokingly, but I can't take all the credit, it was Najire's idea to have some fun in the snow. Yeah, I just figured we could all use a little time to relax, and since it was snowing I was like, how about a snowball fight? The ever-bubbly brunette said as she bounced in her seat, wringing out her hair. So I told Mirio and Tamaki that and they were all for it, but a fight between just the three of us seemed a bit small, so I called Naruto to join, and that's when he had this awesome idea to get you all in as well. It was so cool too, he just called you up and then poof, he looked and sounded just like you and. As Najira rambled on, going so far as to try miming the course of events leading up to the snowball fight, Naruto found himself drifting off into memory lane himself. However, he found himself not just musing over the past day, but the last few months that had gone by since his arrival. And to put bluntly, not much had happened. After his little trip to and from UA, the whiskered blonde found himself with little else to occupy his time until the start of the next school year, which was still a few months out. He couldn't really train outside of basic workouts since this place had such strict regulations on using quirks, and his technicality of not actually having one would only get him so much leniency. Not to mention most of his training tended to be rather destructive to put lightly, and he was currently smack in the middle of a heavily populated city. So with training out, the blonde mostly passed his time hanging out with Rumi, Ray, and Toga even after the house arrest had been lifted. He'd also go out and explore, but it seemed like almost every time he left the house for more than 5 minutes, the boy would somehow always find himself stumbling across a weird ongoing villain conflict. The last time it had been a dude with a doll head controlling stuffed animals to rob toy stores, certainly an odd day to say the least. That might have made things at least a bit more interesting, but Naruto could usually just deal with a mess in a blink and moved on, he hadn't even needed to use Plan B again. Speaking of Ray and Toga though, the duo had both become effectively permanent residents of the apartment. The former due to the continued issue of the hospitals being unable to find any records of her stay, which had led to Nemuri calling up an official investigation on the situation, despite Ray's insistence that it was unnecessary. While nothing had turned up, the sheer lack of evidence in itself was more than concerning to the pro-heroine. Until then it was deemed to be for the best that she continue living with Rumi and Naruto for the foreseeable future. Meanwhile, the latter was somewhat a similar situation, as Toga's legal case for her past crimes was still being settled. The whole situation was at a stalemate for a while on whether she should be held fully accountable for her actions or be dismissed as a case of quirk-induced insanity. Opinions were split down the middle, with many people strongly believing the literally bloodthirsty teen should be tossed into Tartarus for life, while others, including even a few heroes, advocating to give her a chance. Eventually the judge ruled towards the latter, and Toga was given a sentence of 20 years of parole and 5 years house arrest. And seeing as Naruto was effectively a walking blood bank to help keep her cravings in check, naturally it was deemed that she remains under the same household as him, much to Rumi's chagrin. With 2 more people staying for the foreseeable future, the rabid heroine ended up having to rent the opposing apartment just so everyone could have their own rooms. Although this may have been an act of futility as Naruto would often wake up to Toga in his room with some part of his body in her mouth, having dozed off during a midnight snack as it were, or Ray cuddling up to him after having a nightmare. The latter of which had firmly cemented in Toga's mind that the two of them were in fact dating, despite both their frequent denials. On the positive side, after he'd managed to get and learn how to use a cell phone of his own, Naruto kept in contact with Miro, Tamaki, and Najira as well. The trio of second-year students had pretty much made him an official member of their little group and would hang out whenever they weren't preoccupied with classes. Sometimes they'd go to arcades or movies, other times they'd just hang out at the apartment, and once the trio even managed to get permission to have another spar in one of the training grounds, albeit only with proper supervision this time. However, a few months back, Naruto, Mirio, Najira, and Tamaki all sweat-dropped nervously as they looked at the utterly leveled mess that used to be the city simulation. Almost all the buildings were knocked down, fires were everywhere, and a large section had been reduced completely to a smoldering crater. How? Cementus, a pro-hero who looked like a living block of concrete molded into the rough shape of a man, demanded incredulously as he took in the devastation. I turned my back for 5 seconds. 5 seconds. Okay, in my defense, I forgot this place had working gas lines, so using an exploding tag near the main one wasn't one of my greatest ideas. Naruto muttered as he scratched the back of his head with an awkward laugh. And flashback. Yeah, there was not a third time after that. And then we all hid and waited till you guys showed up and bam. Naruto was snapped back to the present when Najira got a little too enthusiastic with her miming and basically stage dived onto his and Rumi's laps. Everything went crazy. Snowballs were flying. It was awesome. Yeah, we know, we were there, you said with an eye roll while sipping her coffee. I for one could have done without the ambush part personally. Well, as a pro-hero shouldn't you always be prepared for unexpected danger? Toga asked coyly as she, for some reason or another, sat upside down in a recliner while sipping from a blood bag with a crazy straw. Oh shush you, don't you have a thumb to suckle or something? The size-changing heroine retorted sarcastically, making the fanged blonde smile around her straw salaciously. Are you offering? Try it and I'll bust your jaw. You're no fun. You and I have very different ideas of what's fun. Oh yeah, for you it's shaking your ass at strangers for attention, right? Isn't that prostitution? Are you a pimp hero? What did you call me? Heh, those two remind me of me and Bachan. Naruto thought with a chuckle as the now pissed youth started chasing a laughing Toga around the apartment. Several choice swears flew from the former's mouth as she tried and failed to get her hands around the latter's neck. Oh, that reminds me. Biting his thumb, Naruto went through several hand seals before smacking his hand against the ground, causing Gamakuchi to appear in a puff of smoke. Oh. Cool. Magic toad. Najira exclaimed, practically teleporting across the room so she could get a closer look at the new arrival. How'd you do that? Are you a quirked animal or do you have a toad quirk? Do you have a teleportation quirk too? Can you even have two quirks? Do you eat bugs? What's that big scroll you're holding? Is it true toads cause warts? Does lick? Najira, we've talked about this, grabbing his friend by the collar, Mirio pulled the excited brunette back with an amused shake of his head, even as she kept rambling off question after question. You gotta respect personal space. Right, but aren't you curious too? Like how did Naruto do that? What is his quirk anyway? He can do all sorts of cool stuff that seems like a bunch of different quirks all at once. Oh, maybe he can copy quirks. Or maybe his quirk changes, like a mix-match thingy. You could just ask him. Nah, I wanna figure it out for myself. Najira said with a grin before rubbing her chin in thought, trying to put together all the pieces that she had so far in a way that made sense. She'd been trying to guess what Naruto's quirk was since they met, with her initial assumption of cat quirk dropping after the first spar. However, the more of what he could do that he showed, the more confused a hero in training became, which in turn only made her more determined to figure it out. Of course Naruto found this very amusing and, being the prankster that he was, had all too much fun messing with her about it. He'd often go out of his way just to find something else he hadn't done yet in front of her, just to throw another wrench into the mix. At the moment though, the blonde wasn't even paying attention to her as his gaze focused on the large scroll held in Gamakuchi's grasp. 3 feet long and almost half a foot wide, the roll of parchment was predominantly green with blue caps on the ends and the kanji for slug on the side. Gucci, why do you have Bachan summon contract? Naruto asked with a raised brow, which only went higher when the toad handed the scroll over to him. Apologies for the confusion, Senin-sama, Gamakuchi said, bowing his head respectfully before continuing. Hokage-sama requested that I bring this to you so you may sign it. She also told me to tell you quote sign this and use it right away, don't ask questions you idiot and do it end quote. Yeah, that sounds like Bachan, shaking his head with a bemused sigh, the blonde handed the toad a small baggie of sweets before looking over the contract. Why would Bachan want me to sign the slug contract all of a sudden? He wasn't opposed to the idea, he got along with Kitsuyu quite well and all, but the sheer randomness of this left him more than a bit stymied. There had to be a reason for Tsunade to have him do this, though for the life of him he couldn't figure out what that was. Well, guess there's only one way to find out. The teen thought with a shrug before unfurling the scroll on the coffee table, revealing a few names in slots including Tsunade, Shizune, and Sakura until he reached a blank slot. Biting his thumb again, the blonde started writing out his name in blood while ignoring the curious concerned looks he was getting all around. Naruto, what are you doing? Rumi finally asked what everyone was thinking out loud, leaning over his shoulder to watch him writing. Not quite sure myself, as he spoke, Naruto put the last few touches of his signature and his fingerprints beneath them, causing the blood to turn pure black like ink. But we're about to find out. What's that supposed to mean? Summoning jutsu. The bunny lady was cut off when her whisker-faced companion went through the hand seals and slammed his palm on the floor, causing another puff of smoke to fill the air. However, instead of another toad appearing like everyone else was expecting, this time the smoke cleared to reveal a white slug about the size of a small dog with bluish-green stripes. Hello again Naruto-sama. It said while nodding towards the whiskered blonde who nodded back politely. Hey Kitsuyu-chan, good to see you, he said while crossing his arms. So can you tell me why Bachan wanted me to do this? I believe she'd rather tell you herself. The slug stated cryptically before erupting into a much larger cloud of smoke that completely filled up the apartment. Oh the fuck? I can't see. What's going on? What's going crash fuck? My nose. Hey. Who just pinched my ass? Haha. Ooh oh. Is this what it like when you phase through stuff Mario? Sort of, but that's not important. What just happened? Somebody open a window. After much scrambling, shouting, and struggles, the sound of a window being opened rang out and the smoke quickly started to dissipate. As it faded, it revealed the ensuing mess that had followed when everyone had been blinded. Yu was laying on the floor clutching her face next to a wall with a dent in it, Rei was hiding under the dining room table, and an unamused Nemuri was giving Toga a dirty look while rubbing her rear end. Said blonde was smiling cheekily back while hiding behind Najira, who curiously poked the girl's perpetually red cheek. Meanwhile, everyone else was still in their original spots aside from Tamaki, who'd opened the window so the smoke could get out. And then there were the new arrivals. Standing in the middle of the room was a new pair of ladies that had definitely not been there before, causing everyone to tense up. Ah-chan. Shizune-chan. Everyone except Naruto, who fell on his ass in shock upon seeing the busty blonde Cage and her raven-haired apprentice standing in front of him. About damn time, brat, Tsunade grumbled, rolling her shoulders with a sigh while tapping her foot against the ground in an impatient manner. Was starting to wonder if you were so dumb that you couldn't even follow basic instructions. Hey. And just like that, all shock was gone as Naruto hopped up to his feet and got right up in his fellow blonde's face. I'm not that dumb, you old hag. Who you calling old hag, moron? Tsunade growled back as she leaned in closer, sparks flying between their eyes. Are you deaf too, you old boy? Punch struck Naruto in the face, sending him flying right out the open window and rocketing off into the distance faster than most of the room's occupants could even blink. That's what you get for calling me old, you damn brat. The bodacious blonde screamed after him while shaking her fist in the air. Tsunade saw Miss Shizune groaned while palming her face in exasperation before turning to the others in the room and bowing her head. I am very sorry for this. Complete and total silence filled the apartment for several moments as everyone just stared with wide eyes. None of them had any idea how to react whatsoever, their brains struggling to even comprehend what just happened. Eventually though, Rumi snapped out of her own stupor and quaintly summed up everyone's thoughts once more. Okay, what the foo? End of chapter. What if Naruto X Nemuri Harem and My Hero Academia end here, and thanks for watching my video till the end.